force and by torture. Pity the nation that knows no other language but its own and no other culture but. Pity the nation whose breath is money and sleeps the sleep of the too well fed. Pity the nation, oh pity the people who allow their rights to erode and their freedoms to be washed away. My country, tears of thee, sweet land of liberty.
Announcement of any special order of the day. We will dispense with the regular order of business to take up the courtesy resolutions calendar. Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on the resolution honoring Kathy Smenkowski.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Vice President and members of the board. Madam Clerk, as Ms. Smenkowski makes her way up to the podium, can you please read the resolution?
Honoring Kathy Smenkowski. Whereas Ms. Kathy Smenkowski vividly remembers the day she was written onto the St. Louis City payroll. It was the beginning of a pay period Sunday, November 10th, 1974. The following Monday was Veterans Day, and she reported for work on Tuesday to the Land Reutilization Authority as a stenographer clerk 1 under Mayor John H. Polker and Director Joe Backers. And whereas Kathy had graduated from Central High School in June of 1974, the city's Department of Personnel had come to Central and given a typing and stenography test, and students were told they would be put on a list and called to interview at some point. In the meantime, she took a clerical job with International Shoe Company on Washington Avenue in the Polly Parrott Red Goose District, and admits she spent a lot of her first paychecks on shoes because the company offered employees a nice discount. And whereas Kathy worked 3 years in LRA before promoted up to a Steno Clerk 2 in the Budget Division for 13 years. She served under Budget Directors Jack Weber, Stephen P. Mullen, and Joanne LaSala. And whereas Mayor Vincent C. Shamel, Jr. tapped Kathy to join his staff in the middle of his 3rd term, she served on staff with Mayor Freeman R. Bosley, Jr., and Mayor Clarence Harmon, who promoted her to her current title as Public Information Officer. She served the first 2 terms of Mayor Francis G. Slay and shifted to the Director of Public Safety's office the last 2 terms of Slay's administration. She returned in service to Room 200 for Mayor Lyda Crusen's term and remained during Mayor Tashara O. Jones's administration. And whereas after 8 years of night school, Kathy earned her Bachelor of Science degree summa cum laude in 1997 from St. Louis University School of Professional Studies. She is the first person in her immediate family to graduate from college. And whereas Kathy is an active member of St. Gabriel and Archangel Catholic Church and an officer in the Legion of Mary, St. Louis Regional Senatus. She is the author of a children's book entitled If the Shoe Fits. And in her free time, she enjoys visiting her nieces and their families, reading, writing, Facebooking, and playing bingo. And whereas Kathy recognizes the many blessings she has received through the opportunity to work and interact with so many wonderful, dedicated fellow civil servants, inspiring elected officials, caring civic leaders, and amazing St. Louis citizens who really care about the city of St. Louis, notwithstanding the issues we face and want to make a positive difference. Now there be it resolved by the St. Louis Board of Aldermen that we pause in our deliberation to celebrate, honor, and thank Kathy Smenkowski for her service to the city of St. Louis. We further direct the clerk of this board to spread a copy of this resolution across the minutes of these proceedings. and to prepare a commemorative copy to the end that it may be presented by the sponsor to Kathy on November 7, 2024, celebrating 50 years of dedication to her beloved city, introduced this 7th day of November 2024 by the Honorable Shameen Clark Hubbard, Alderwoman of the 10th Ward. Co-sponsors, the Honorable Michael Browning, Alderman of the 9th Ward, the Honorable Ann Schweitzer, Alderwoman of the 1st Ward, adopted this 7th day of November 2024 as it attests by.
Absolutely. Sir. There's a standing ovation in the room right now, and she deserves it. Let me tell you, I was asked if this was a photo op. I said, absolutely. This is so much more than a photo op. If anybody recognizes the value in capturing history, capturing story, capturing facts, and then sharing it here in the city of St. Louis, it's you, Ms. Minkowski. The work you have done is immeasurable. The decades of work and service is incomparable. And so I count it a blessing to be able to stand here and honor you this way, the unique way that other people can in passing this resolution and then now putting it into the official history of the city of St. Louis, 50 plus years of service and decade to our beloved city. And it was a choice that you made with a smile. And I know there's going to be so many others, and there were others that signed up to be co-sponsors. And I wanted to make sure that I share my little story, and I know they'll share theirs as well. But you know, when I first got down here, so nervous. But so on days like that and times like that, you really remember people that made you feel a certain kind of way. And Miss Kathy, you made me feel that way our first interaction, because you told me a story about my grandfather and the service that he had and you serving with him. And that kind of calmed me down and made me feel like, oh, I can go on and step another day and serve. And then the relationship I built with you from then on out, I don't take for granted, not for a second. So thank you for this 50 years. I don't know if I'll be here for your next 50 years of service to the city of St. Louis, but you can always count on me. I'll never forget. I thank you. I honor you. And with that, I know, Mr. Vice President and Leader Speaker, we want you to be able to have some words and then our colleagues.
Alderwoman from the 11th, you're recognized.
No.
Mike.
We got it? Wonderful. Good morning, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the board. I'd like to move that we, first of all, embank this resolution for Ms. Minkowski.
Been moved by the Alderman from the 11th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th, that we embank resolution number 167. Madam Clerk?
All righty. Thank you so much.
We need a vote.
You got to vote on it.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan. Alderman Vollmer. Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys.
Aye.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd.
Yes. Aye.
Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
14 aye votes.
With that, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 11th Ward to make resolution 167 and bank. You may continue, Alderwoman.
Thank you, thank you. So, Ms. Minkowski, I just want to thank you so much for every time I've called or had to come by the office, I've always encountered you as being such a positive person. always a smile, always willing to help. And we experience that a lot. I don't want to make it sound like you're the only person in the City Hall that does that. But I really do appreciate all that you've given, sacrifice, brought to the table of this job. We know that these are difficult jobs, and sometimes we even have to deal with difficult people. But you have taken this on for all of these years with a beautiful sense of grace, and I salute you. Thank you.
Alderman from the 5th.
Hello, thank you. Hi, Kath. November 10th, 1974, one day after Richard Nixon had resigned as president, and you came into City Hall, so there must be some connection there. I was a sophomore in high school with my learner's permit. But it seems like ever since I've been here, you've been here, and it won't be the same without you. So thank you for everything you've done so much. Thank you.
Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Looking good up there. And members of the board, I just want to also thank Kathy for her years of service. Anytime I have the opportunity to go into room 200, she's usually at the front desk. She just always have a great smile. I'm right here, Ms. Always have a great smile and just so pleasant. I know during this last year, I was able to share a story with her of something that I was going through, and she was able to relate with some things that was going on with her family. So just thank you for always being so nice, so pleasant, and just joyful, and thank you for your dedication to the St. Louis, and look forward to seeing what's next in your next journey. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Madam Mayor.
Permission to speak?
Granted.
I couldn't let this day go by without coming here personally to express my appreciation for Kathy Sminkowski. The mayor's office is the front door to our city, and Kathy sits at that front door, always pleasant, always greeting people with a smile, and sometimes a funny joke. Oh, yeah. Yes. If you know Kathy, you know that she is hilarious and has some of the funniest jokes. So I just want to thank you for making my transition easy. And also thank you for everything that you've done for our city over the last 50 years. You are irreplaceable, and the city and the mayor's office doesn't run the same when you're not there. So cheers to 50 years and many, many more. We love you.
Any further discussion? Kathy, would you like to say a few words?
Wow, how cool is this? I just want to thank you all for this special honor today. And they always say that, find a job that you like to do. And I did right out of high school, and just got starstruck, like the first week that I worked here. Starstruck by just all the people and all the politicians, and the news people from Channel 5 or Channel 2, Channel 4 would come in and want to do stories. And I was like, oh my gosh, little Kathy Sminkowski from Hogan Street gets to meet these people and be here in the room where the action takes place. And I never forgot my roots, so I am really inside little Kathy Sminkowski from Hogan Street. And so when people do call me and citizens call me, and there's an issue or a problem that they're dealing with, then I really do want to sympathize with them and try and help them if I can. It doesn't always happen, but I always do the best that I can. And yes, this job is so serious. I mean, working in the mayor's office is very serious, heavy calls that come in a lot of times. And so, yeah, humor is the best medicine. So yeah, I try and make a joke out of some things, but just to get a little balance there. So, truly. So anyway, appreciate this. Love you all, and not quite retiring yet. Did not go across the street and turn in the papers yet, but I am very cognizant that when you hit certain numbers, like 50, you have to think about whether what the next chapter will look like, and I really do want to collect some pension checks. I really do. I just want at some point, but maybe you don't leave the mayor's office in the middle of the term usually. So you sign up for those 4 years, and you stick with those 4 years. Now come this decision again. Who knows? We'll have to see. I'll have to see if I still have it in me yet. I still have some more areas, so I'm good. All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
I just want to echo everyone's sentiments and thank Kathy for her 50 years of service. And I'm not going to put her on the spot and ask her for a joke this morning, but I do very much appreciate the nature, jovial nature that you bring to work, and you will be missed once you do actually retire from the mayor's office. But we know that that's still a ways off, and certainly appreciate your tenacity, your loyalness, and all of the work that you do day in and day out for the citizens. Thank you. If anyone would like to take a photo with Kathy, please approach the dais. Get you front and center. Do any of the guests want to join?
Only $5.
Mm-hmm. Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on the motion to adopt the courtesy resolution calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. I move that we adopt the courtesy resolution calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 7th, that we adopt the courtesy resolution calendar. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Introduction of honored guests. Alderwoman from the 11th.
All right, good morning again, Mr. Vice Chair. So my honored guests today, I guess, are going to be untraditional people. I don't know who made the coffee this morning, but it is wonderful. It was just what I needed. It was you. Thank you. Now, it was really dark, so I'm afraid it may change the color of my liver. but I am grateful. And in light of Tuesday's results, yesterday I spent a good amount of time on the telephone with constituents throughout my ward who are seriously grieving. But I wanted to remind people that even in the midst of a storm, we still need to be grateful for very small things. That we woke up this morning, that most of us had a roof, maybe even had some breakfast. I had a delicious cup of very dark coffee. And just the small things. I got into my truck and she turned right on. And so we really do need to take stock of all of the blessings that we've had, and we will have once again. This too shall pass. And so please take heart, everyone who can hear my voice. We will get through this. You're strong enough to do that. You're resilient enough to do that. Together, we're going to have to stand strong with our beliefs and the things that we want to help this nation to become. I know it's scary. I heard that yesterday over and over again. And I have to say, let us take heart and be grateful for the very smallest of things, our families, our churches, our co-workers. Be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other introductions of honored guests, which would be folks that are currently in the chamber?
Yeah.
Alderwoman from the 10th.
I didn't have a guest until I walked back over to my desk, and I want to have as my honored guest my colleague, Alderman Orion, and his socks. And I want to make sure, STL TV, that you can get these socks, these City of St. Louis socks from STL Style House, as my honored guest this morning.
Any further introductions of honored guests? Alderman from the 5th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, I don't have a guest. I would just request Dave Sweeney turn his pants down. I've had a long night, and they're keeping me awake. Thank you.
Any further introductions? Seeing none, we'll move on to approval of the meeting minutes. Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on the approval of the minutes from Friday, November 1st, 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Members of the board, I move that we adopt the minutes from Friday, November 1st, 2024.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 11th, that we adopt or we approve the meeting minutes from Friday, November 1st, 2024. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Report of city officials.
Report of city officials can be found in A, B, C, and D of the agenda and have been placed in the Google Drive for your review. Dear honorable members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for reappointment to the 1225 Washington Community Improvement District: Seamus McGowan and Sean McGowan.
Alderman from the 14th, you're recognized on Mayor Jones's appointments to the 1225 Washington Community Improvement District.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, and members of the board. I move to approve the two McGowans to the 1225 Washington Community Improvement.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 11th, that we approve Mayor Jones's appointments to the 1225 Washington Community Improvement District. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Orion. Aye. Alderman Balmer. Aye. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge.
Aye.
President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Aye.
Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. 14 aye votes.
By your vote, you have sustained the motion from the Alderman from the 14th and have approved Mayor Jones's appointments to the 1225 Washington Community Improvement District.
Dear honorable members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment to the 14th and Market Community Improvement District: Todd Mitchell, Stephen Cruz, and Jeffrey Pardeek.
Alderman from the 14th, you're recognized on Mayor Jones' appointments to the 14th and Market Community Improvement.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President and members of the board. I would like to approve the following individuals to the 14th Market Community Improvement District.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we approve Mayor Jones' appointments to the 14th and Market Community Improvement District. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Dear honorable members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment to the St. Louis Convention Hotel 3 Community Improvement District: Austin Albert and Earl Peters.
Alderwoman from the 8th, you're recognized on Mayor Jones's appointments to the St. Louis Convention Hotel 3 Community Improvement District.
Thank you. I move that we approve the mayor's appointments to the Hotel 3 Community Improvement District.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 8th, seconded by the Alderperson from the 14th, that we approve Mayor Jones's appointments to the St. Louis Convention Hotel 3 Community Improvement District. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Dear honorable members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for reappointment to the Development Disabilities Resource Commission: Cynthia Mueller, Patrick Brennan, and Nina North Murphy.
Alderwoman from the 13th, you're recognized on Mayor Jones' appointments to the Development Disabilities Resource Commission.
I ask to support the appointment of the individuals for Development Disability Resource Commission.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we approve Mayor Jones's appointments to the Development Disabilities Resource Commission. Is there any discussion? Alderwoman from the 12th.
Mr. Vice President, members of the board, if the Alderwoman from the 13th would yield.
Alderwoman from the 13th will yield to questions from the Alderwoman from the 12th.
Alderwoman,
Alderwoman, please proceed.
Thank you. As been per our rules, I thought that since the Development Disability Resource Commission is a citywide commission, I thought we were supposed to send those to a committee. That's what we had agreed to do.
They were at the health committee. We interviewed.
Okay. Oh, this is the second one. Okay.
Yes,
thanks.
ma'am. I'm on top.
Okay. You answered my question. I have no further questions.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Petitions and communications. Does anyone want to take any bills or resolutions off of any of our informal calendar? Does anyone want to take any bills or resolutions off of any of our informal calendars? Does anyone want to take any bills or resolutions off of our informal calendar? We'll dispense with line items 9, 10, and 11. First reading of board bills.
Board Bill number 127, sponsored by Alderman Browning. An ordinance pertaining to a traffic calming system in the city of St. Louis and establishing procedures for constituent requests of traffic calming. The process for notification, approval, and implementation containing definitions, an effective date, and a severability clause. Board Bill number 128, sponsored by Alderman Ryan. An ordinance amending Chapter 3.99 of the Revised Code of the City of St. Louis to clarify the applicability of living wage requirements. Board Bill number 129, sponsored by Alderwoman Sanye, an ordinance establishing a four-way stop site at the intersection of Clem Street and McRee Avenue in Botanical Heights neighborhood in the 7th Ward to regulate traffic traveling in all directions and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill number 130, sponsored by Alderwoman Sanye, pursuant to ordinance number 70333, as amended by ordinance number 71394. An ordinance directing the Director of Streets to install a speed hump on the 42nd block of Folsom Avenue to calm the flow of traffic in the Botanical Heights neighborhood within the 7th Ward and containing an emergency clause. That is the extent of first reading of board bills.
Reference to Committee of Board Bills.
To the Public Infrastructure and Utilities Committee, board bills number 127, 129, and 130. To the Transportation and Commerce Committee, board bill number 128. That is the extent of reference to committee.
Second reading and report of standing committees.
We have none.
Please dispense with line item 14, report of special committees.
We have none.
Please dispense with line item 15, board bills for perfection consent.
Board bill number 59, sponsored by Alderwoman Keys, an ordinance authorizing, directing the mayor and comptroller of the city of St. Louis to execute upon receipt of the consideration of the sum of $10 and other good and valuable considerations, a quick claim deed to remise, release, and forever quick claim until Bethlehem Missionary Baptist Church, certain city-owned property located in City Block 1883, which property is known and numbered as 3509 Cousins Avenue in the city of St. Louis, Missouri, and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill number 87, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge, an ordinance to install stop signs within various locations within the 14th Ward. Board Bill number 121, sponsored by Alderman Browning, an ordinance pertaining to parking within the Forest Park Southeast Parking District, which establishes the location and restrictions for curb parking in the restricted parking zone in the district created by this ordinance, authorizing the placement of permit parking only signs within the district, and prohibiting the parking within the district of any vehicle which does not obtain the authorized permit, containing definitions and a penalty clause. Board Bill number 123, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge, an ordinance establishing a four-way stop sign at the intersection of Locust and 22nd Street, regulating all traffic and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill number 110, committee sub, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge, an ordinance to repeal certain sections of Chapter 15 and Section 11.20 of Chapter 11 of the Revised Code of the City of St. Louis, addressing acts of public decency, offenses against public peace, and other miscellaneous offenses, in order to eliminate outdated, unconstitutional, and conflicting provisions that are inconsistent with the state statutes. Board Bill number 111, sponsored by Alderman Vollmer, Alderman Narayan, Alderman Aldridge, Alderman Oldenburg, Alderwoman Velazquez, Alderwoman Sanye, and Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, and Alderwoman Keys. An ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment authorizing the Fire Commissioner on behalf of the City of St. Louis to enter into the 2023 Fire Prevention and Safety Grant Agreement with the United States of Homeland Security and accept the grant funds, appropriating said funds and required city match for said funds, and authorizing the Fire Commissioner to expend the appropriated funds by entering into contracts or otherwise for grant purposes and containing an emergency clause. That is the extent of board bills for perfection consent.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Alderman from the 14th, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I would like to put Board Bill 110, Committee Sub, on the perfection calendar.
Madam Clerk, will you please move Board Bill 110, Committee Substitute to the regular perfection calendar?
So noted.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 10th, you're recognized on the motion to adopt the board bills for perfection consent.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Members of the board, I move that we adopt the board bills for perfection consent calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 7th, that we adopt the board bills for perfection consent. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Board bills for perfection.
Board Bill number 114 as amended, sponsored by Alderwoman Sanye, President Green, and Alderman Aldridge. An ordinance amending parts of Chapter 26 by adding new definitions of special residential uses, amending certain uses of special residential uses, regulating special residential uses and site requirements, and containing a severability clause, emergency clause.
Alderman from the 7th, you're recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 114 as amended.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Vice President.
Vice President. I would make a. I would like to make a motion to perfect Board Bill 114.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we perfect Board Bill 114 as amended. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you so much, Sir Vice President. You do look good up there, I have to say, especially in your kind of purple shirt. It might look pink, I'm gonna go purple. I feel like, I know I've been at this meeting every single week saying, hey, we're working on this bill, we're revisiting it. Let me know if you want me to come to your communities. Let me know if you want to meet. And honestly, I think at this point, I've had a great conversation with every single one of you, and at least have tried to reach out to every single one of you for a conversation. I really want to give just a thank you to my colleagues. I feel like this has been one of the most difficult conversations to have at the Board of Aldermen. But as I said, when we were discussing this topic beforehand, I think the fact that we've been able to have the conversations, the fact that it's been able to move forward, and especially you all inviting me into your community so that I could hear from your constituents and see what their concerns were, and then go back and come up with something. I just want to make sure that I'm thanking all of you all. And for folks watching at home, I know a lot of times government looks very dysfunctional. It might look like we don't like each other, but I really think that this bill is a sign of our ability to have hard conversations, to focus on a policy, and to find a sweet spot that best works. And so Board Bill 114 is proposing that we move a majority of the special residential uses, which is much broader than shelters. This is transitional housing, group homes. These are boarding homes. These are homes in our cities that are non-traditional housing, that don't require a lease or a mortgage, often that are connected to social services that we know that there is a need for in our city, and that human beings and residents amongst us need. And so it proposes that we move this to a conditional use process. I think the first thing to note is that it does not touch plat and petition. This is a Chapter 26 bill, and Chapter 26 is all about the zoning code. Anything under plat and petition would be under Chapter 25, so it does not touch that. So it adjusts the zoning code. It moves a lot of these facilities from not allowed to a conditional use. It requires an operational plan, which is really important. I think that's something that the building division has been really excited about, saying that they want the opportunity to work for, that will give us important information up front about a facility when they're proposing to open, so that they can tell us, here's how many clients we plan to serve, here are the services that we will offer, here is the staffing that we will have, here's how long we anticipate the stays to be, here are our public safety plans, and just a lot of the information that I think that neighbors and communities will want up front or in that operational plan. And that operational plan will now be available to any department within the city of St. Louis, but also to any resident who might call in and ask. It can be emailed to them. They can review that as we make that decision. And then I think the other big part of this bill is absolutely the density language. So I think one of the things, you live in a city, you can see it, you hear from colleagues, you can hear it, you talk to residents, is how do we avoid the oversaturation of resources for poor people? We should not concentrate them just in downtown or concentrate them just in North City. We should spread these resources out. And so there's also some density language that says that you can't have more than 2 on any city block, and that you also cannot have them within 500 feet to each other. Of course, anything that's in place will be grandfathered in. This is not for anything that is currently in existence, but moving forward, in order for you to go through this process, regardless of whether or not we are funding you, you will apply. First, you will go collect your signatures. Assuming you get your signatures and you turn those in and the zoning department verifies all of them, you will also submit an operational plan, and then you will get a notice for a conditional use hearing if you are within the majority of the uses, and then you will, the zoning department will evaluate. I do also want to make sure that I'm lifting up just the deep collaboration of this bill, not just with colleagues, but absolutely the building division. Mr. Ware was able to make it to one of our committee hearings and talked about the need for us to have clearer processes, and in some ways not having a clearer process and not having the allowance for these facilities. It makes me want to thank Miriam Keller as well for planning. I definitely want to thank Mary Hart Vernon for zoning. I want to thank Gracie and Casey Milberg from the mayor's office. I want to thank the president's office. We've been sitting for months having meeting after meeting after meeting, conversation after conversation after conversation. And so I think Board Bill 114 that's in front of you, the goal of this legislation is to create a clear, efficient process for the facilities that we know folks among us need, but still to center community. Still to be cognizant of the things that people have uplifted of concerns, which is why plat and petition is there, which is why the operational plan is there, which is why the density language is there, but it is also to provide a pathway forward. And with that, I do have a couple of amendments. So I would like to bring amendment number 2 in the drive up for adoption.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 7th. Where's your 1? That we take up amendment number 2 to Board Bill 114 as amended. It's been seconded by the Alderman from the 1st. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you. Amendment number 2, if you all watched our HUS meeting, Alderman Cone, we had conversations originally about the idea of a statement that could be in the operational plan. Sure that when these facilities are operating the best that the city can, we are encouraging providers not to discriminate based upon who they are providing their service for. And so if you say that you are providing service for women, we want to make sure that all women are able to be in that as best we can. And so after the last meeting, we went and had some conversations with the city councilor. So now we do have a statement that has been vetted, that has went through all the property channels, and that again, we know that there's a large amount of LGBTQ youth out there who are in need of these resources, and we want to, as best we can as a city, make sure that they are able to get access to this new, more efficient, transparent process that we hopefully perfect today.
Any discussion on amendment number 2 to Board Bill 114 as amended? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion, amendment number 2 to Board Bill 114 as amended is adopted. Alderman from the 1st.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. I move to adopt amendment number 1 to Board Bill number 114.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th, that we adopt amendment number 1 to Board Bill 114 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you all for that vote, that second, Alderman from the 9th. What this amendment does, and it should be on your desk or in your drive, but it is regarding special residential uses, especially the congregate shelters in zoning districts A and B, making those not allowed in those zoning districts. This change comes at really looking at the zoning code and what could change in this bill to make constituents, I think a little bit more comfortable that the housing or the use of the properties around them in specific zoning districts will be appropriate to the type of housing and properties that are around them in their zoning districts, especially in A and B. It's very unlikely that a congregate shelter would be an appropriate use for many of the buildings in zones A and B. So it felt like a place to make a compromise with this bill that would make some of my constituents, I think, feel a little bit more comfortable with what's coming forward today. And of course, number 1 being that plat and petition is maintained throughout the bill, not touched at all, actually. So, if there is a building that does go through plat and petition and go through the variance process, then the conditional use process, which I think is much improved in this bill for special residential uses, this would still be, a possibility from a variance standpoint, but would make it from a zoning standpoint laid out that it's not expected and very unlikely to become a possibility in that area as per this amendment. So happy to answer any questions. Appreciate the time of the sponsor to talk with me about this and to work with me on something that we felt could best serve our constituents. So thank you.
Is there any questions on amendment number 1 to Board Bill 114 as amended? Alderman from the 12th.
Yes, Mr. Vice President and members of the board, if the Alderwoman from the first would yield.
Yes.
Alderwoman from the
Yes.
first will yield to questions from Alderwoman.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Alderwoman from the 12th, you may proceed.
Thank you. So I agree with your amendment and should go much further, but let's start with what you have. So the shelter congregants would not be allowed in A and B, right? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so one of the problems that we have sometimes, and I think the state law is going to be a little different than what we're doing, is that sometimes A and B might be across the street from C. I actually have things where that happens in my ward, different zoning areas. I have where F is on one side of the street and then unrestricted is on the other side of the street. So in this, in your change, what would happen if it was an A and B, but right across the street with C and D? Would that then allow it to be right across the street from A and B? And wouldn't that kind of undermine the intent of your amendment, which I'm going to support, by the way?
Thank you, Alderwoman. That's a really good question, and I appreciate you bringing it forward. I think the number one reason that this bill has improved in my mind so much is that it maintains the plat and petition process. So if you did have a different zoning district across the street, the plat and petition piece is still maintained for shelter. So you'd still be going within the 500 feet to get signatures, and as we all know, the plat and petition process is something that if people engage, it's pretty clear where the neighborhood wants to go if they are able to get the signatures needed. I certainly think that is an important piece to just maintain in our structure currently for shelters. And this felt like one that there's a reason oftentimes why, there's a reason why different parts of the city have different zoning codes, and the use of the property across the street may be different than the residential use on the other side of the street. So I think it makes sense that there's going to be a line somewhere, and this is the attempt to at least have A and B, where likely based on our current code there would not be buildings appropriate for that sort of use within those zoning codes. But your point is well taken.
So I would like to disagree with you a little bit. There is usually the plat and petition. I've watched this bill very closely because the people who are doing it, to me, are very non-transparent. So there's an exception on page 15 of 18, line 19 and 20 says, however, one occupant with a business license may expand their operations to another parcel within 500 feet radius through a conditional use permit. This process shall not apply in the event a BPS permitted facility operating prior to the effective date of this ordinance submits an application to expand any facility. So to me, they're leaving out and leaving a giant loophole for specifically somebody else, somebody that's right across the street from my house. I know what is going on. It's Covenant House, which has had 90 or more complaints, none of them from me, but from the residents around it. But they have refused to close it, and these complaints go back to since it was open almost. So I don't think that it does close that loophole. It tries to give them a loophole not to have to do the plat and petition, not to have to do the conditional use, to just let them expand. They've already bought the building across, boarded it up, had it vandalized, more problems. So I would disagree with you and say that what this bill is doing is trying to take advantage of what has happened in the last few years, probably 20 years, 25 years, in which the former mayoral administrations have forced everything into North St. Louis. And this is going to codify that as to say, well, that's okay. The very thing that the Black aldermen have been saying about what has been done, and it's not just the one sitting down here. We actually sent a letter to the mayor 3.5 years ago. Alderwoman Boyd sent it, but all of us signed on to it. 9 of us signed on to it, saying that the homeless population and other populations were a problem. We wanted to have a a meeting and talk about that. That letter has never been responded to. And what has happened is they have continually pushed things into North St. Louis. You talk about downtown, downtown, and not you specifically. Downtown was actually gentrified enough to close Larry Rice. And so those people then ended up more into North St. Louis. It was interesting at a meeting we had last Saturday, people from different parts of South St. Louis came and said that they felt like that it was also going to adversely affect them if they were a less affluent community, and that this was a way to codify and make it all right what has been done in the community. So when the alderwoman from the 7th gets up and speaks about North St. Louis, which she doesn't live in, which she knows nothing about, she's got another agenda that's coming from some other people on the board, not you. And it is not going to make it better. It's going to make it harder, because once you let somebody extend another one, then we're not talking about a few facilities. You've added another building. Do you then give them an exception for another building? And then you start to get into some racism that's happening in the African American community, and you're going to have a lawsuit. I do not believe that. I think what your bill does, your amendment does is good, but it is not going far enough. And yes, there are reasons why we have zoning right across the street, and why we have zoning across the street, because it was F neighborhood commercial, and the whole process was supposed to serve the people in the community, not bother the people in the community. We've had a process for the last 20 years in which things were pushed down people's throats, many of it through misinformation and misunderstandings, and then said, oh, this is okay because it's just North St. Louis. And that's what this bill is doing. And there's no attempt to try to rectify and say, well, we know that these have been problems, so let's get these things out of North St. Louis because we pushed them down there, and let's make them go through the process too. But when I asked the alderwoman from the 7th last time she sponsored a bill like this, what about downtown and Larry Rice? She said she doesn't want to get into that. There's a reason she doesn't, because that's in the 14th ward, not in the 12th ward or the 13th ward or the 11th ward. Okay, that's in the 14th ward downtown. She doesn't want to get into it because that's where the progressives live, and they don't want to have to deal with that. Downtown doesn't want to have to deal with these different people, because this is what has happened. We have security racks all around downtown St. Louis right now. We have security racks around our parks. The reason why is that crime and things happen, and then you run people out of their communities. So I'm going to support your bill. I'm absolutely not going to support the entire bill, because it was not meant to care about the people who already live there. It was meant to have a political agenda, and I would implore the mayor to veto this bill, because the agenda is to hurt people who live in certain parts of the city and not care about the effects of what's going on. And so thank you for your amendment, but it does not go far enough, and it does not protect the people who have been offended and whose neighborhoods have been hurt the most. And the reports keep coming in that the middle class, especially the Black middle class, are leaving at record numbers. And this doesn't do anything except for to exacerbate that problem in the Black community. And so I will support your amendment, but I don't think it goes far enough. And I disagree with your assertion that it protects some people. It protects a very small amount of people, because if you don't already have something in there that was put in illegally, then you don't have to deal with that. But if you already have something that was put in illegally that has 90 or more complaints, you're still allowing that to apply and extend, and that is ridiculous. And so for that reason, I won't be supporting the full bill, but I do applaud that you got that little bit in, but it does nothing to protect a lot of North St. Louis. It may protect your place where you live, but it's not a holistic application. And I want to just say one other thing. I don't know why everybody thinks that people are begging for the zoning code to be changed to agree to all of this, because all I've heard from people all over the city is this is not what we wanted. This is why are you doing this? Why do you keep forcing this? And I keep telling them, because there's a political agenda coming from the top. That's their agenda. And it is not mine. It's not some of the people here. And it's making people scared that it's coming up to their election. And so people will come after them. But I would implore everybody to remember you represent your entire constituency. And just because some people think that this is something the people want, they don't. They didn't want urination and defecation in the streets. They don't want a lot of this stuff. There was a reason the zoning was put this way. We're not updating. We're taking our city back and we're going to empty it out. When I first got elected, we had close to 400 and 500,000 people. We're down to under 300,000 people. Just keep going. There won't be anybody. So again, I want to thank you, Alderman from the first, for introducing this, but this does not protect us from this poorly written bill. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman, you're recognized to close on amendment number 1 to Board Bill 114 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderman from the 7th, that we adopt amendment number 1 to Board Bill 114 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Any further discussion on Board Bill 114 as amended? Alderman from the 12th. Alderwoman from the 12th, your hand is raised.
Yes, sir. I'm trying to get I got my audio back on. It was sticking. I'm sorry. Mr. President, members of the board, if the Alderwoman from the 7th would yield.
Alderwoman from the 7th, will you yield to questions from the Alderwoman from the 12th? She acknowledged yes. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Alderwoman, I want to address, thank you for yielding. I want to address the exception that you put at the bottom of page 15, going over to 18, about specifically, there shall be no more than one special residential use within a radius of 500 feet of another special residential use, and no city block may have more than 2 special residential uses. However, one occupant with a business license may expand their operation to another one within a 500 feet radius through a conditional use permit. This provision shall not apply in the event that a BPS permitted facility operating prior to the effective date of this ordinance submits an application to expand any existing facility. So if you already have been pushed into a neighborhood and you have already had magnitude of problems, we would still give them an exception to go ahead and apply for another permit without going through the process that everybody else has to go through. Is that correct?
That's not correct.
So what is correct then?
So the language that you're referring to, I do want to lift up that it was actually asked for by several of our colleagues at the board. And what that is saying is that if you've already done the plat and petition process and you are applying to expand your facility in that same radius, you do not have to redo the plat and petition process because you're already in that area and you've already canvassed the area. Now, if they move outside of an area of the radius that they did plat and petition in, then they will have to do it again and go through this process.
So this is if you've done a plat and petition and you've already applied, and how long ago could you have applied for it? Is there a limit on when you applied for it?
As long as you are actively operating and trying to expand your operation, there's no limit as long as you're active and you're staying within that same perimeter.
And so is there somebody that is already applied for a plat and petition, already turned one in and applied for a permit that you know of? Is there a facility that has done that?
I mean, a lot of facilities that are operating in our city right now have done plat.
I did not ask that question. My question is that you know of.
Yes, majority. I think a lot of the facilities that are operating right now have done plat and petition.
To expand.
Oh, not to expand. I don't think anyone has done it to expand. But again, this is a new process, so we want to make sure that we're not stopping people if they've already gotten the community consent in that way.
So, and how long would community consent be? Because I got a call from my community that somebody was walking around saying they were doing a plat and petition, and they were outraged because they said they weren't telling the truth. And so how long does this plat and petition application apply? And if people want to take their names off of it and it doesn't, then does that go into effect? How does that work?
Plat and petition doesn't expire because they do plat and petition to get access to a hearing right now through the Board of Adjustment process. So once those calls are made and the signatures are verified and zoning says you've done plat and petition, we've called, you've gotten 51% of property owners or registered voters within that radius, they're able to go on to their hearing. And so it doesn't expire. They've completed that step in the process.
And they can go on to their hearing, but you're saying they don't have to have, you're saying they still have to have a hearing, or they do not have to have a hearing?
We're saying for this, because this bill changes the process and requires a conditional use hearing, that because this is a new process, if you are already existing and you're trying to expand within a parameter that you have already done plat and petition in, then you do not have to do plat and petition again because you've already done it. So it's kind of just acknowledging
and what would you do?
You would be able to expand your facility if you're still within that perimeter.
And how would that have, and that would have worked? So with the people in the community have known that they were doing a plat and petition? Because like across from me, I haven't had anybody talk to me about a plat and petition, but I know they've been walking one. How does that work?
With this bill, under this bill, you would know. I know the process has been very shaky and perhaps inconsistent in the past, but that's the goal of this bill, is to create, one process and put everybody on the same page.
So then why wouldn't, so you admit, and in prior things that you have admitted that they have pushed things into North St. Louis. Is that what you said in your conversations with me, that, yeah, it's been unfair and we want this to be fair? So why then would you make the people who have been pushed into North St. Louis start their process over and say, look, you already had an unfair advantage, and so let's make sure that you're operating the way you're supposed to? And is there anything in here about how you deal with people who are a nuisance and and not let them expand? Where's the nuisance part of this, of you can't expand? Because obviously we can't close things that are nuisances, because we have gunfire in North St. Louis for 20, 30 years. They can't close it. We have specific locations. So the police chief calls me and says, hey, Alderwoman, this has been a problem for 20 years. They can't close it. They open up more of the same. So why are you letting anybody, you who talk to me about taxes being paid and business license, why wouldn't one of the requirements be that you not have any nuisance reports?
So there is a nuisance process that is in this bill, and that is why we want to move things. The two things that this bill gives us: number one, right now the building division basically implied that a lot of the facilities and shelters that are in the city, unless we are funding them, we're not able to hold them accountable and shut them down. But when we move them to a conditional use process, they get a conditional use license. And so if they violate any of those site requirements, if they stray from their operational plan, they will be able to be called back in. In addition to the fact right now, if you think about what the city is able to hold these facilities accountable to, it's very much limited to illegal activities. So it's very much limited. You would have to have gunshots. You would have to have something that was illegal. With this bill, if it is perfected in third and final pass, because we have the operational plan, if a provider tells the city and the community that they're doing one thing and then they come and do another, we now have the operational plan. And so the building division can send their inspector, and if they find that your operations are not consistent with what you told us you would be doing, you would be able to be called back in. In regards to what I've said to you in conversation, I've said this, vocally to my colleagues, and I don't think hopefully it's not a strange point to anyone in the city of St. Louis of the way that racism works through our zoning codes. And a part of that is that we concentrate resources for poor people in primarily Black communities, and certainly in our city, we've done that in North City. And so the way that is trying to address in the bill, keeping in mind that when we pass legislation, it's passed for the entire city, is the bill really puts in a position where, number one, you got to go through plat and petition first. So we're trying, I understand it's not a perfect process. I understand people have not followed it to a T, but I think that is a large barrier, because those signatures have to be verified by the zoning department in order for you to open up and operate. So that's in place. In addition to the fact that they do have the conditional use process where the alder will get notified, communities members will be able to show up. In addition to the fact, really, that there's density language that limits that. And I do have a map. I had sent you an email asking if you were available to talk, and I didn't get a response, but I had hoped that I could walk you through a map.
No, I'm not. I wasn't available because you went and came into my ward. You did not come and deal with me. You just came and showed up for somebody who is not the alder person, and no, I'm not available. And what I'm saying to you, first of all, I get so sick and tired of people saying minority communities poor. Not all minority communities are poor. There are working class and middle class minority communities in North St. Louis that are not poor. That's the first stereotype I want to reject that's coming out
I
of your
didn't say
mouth.
that.
Okay. The second one, you did say that. And
I
then the
didn't say
second
that.
one, what I want to say is, yes, it is. That's what you say.
I
And
didn't
that's
say
what
that.
people say, poor and minority communities.
I said that we
They're not
concentrate
poor
the resources.
minority communities. They are communities that have different social and economic groups in them. And the reason why they put the Covenant House across from us is because they didn't want to be in poor Black communities. They wanted to be across from middle class communities. And you talk about what should happen. I'm telling you, for 15 or 12 years or however it's been open, there's all these reports and no way to close it. They will not close it. So we're going to have to go to court, just like they did with the Shell, because they've done this all over in my Black communities, is that they will not close them. They're very apparent proper problems. They're recorded gunfire. You're talking about, oh, if it's gunfire, it's breaking into places. It is climbing on top of my roof in my garage and trying to come into my backyard, and then them getting caught and running back to Covenant House. It's them setting fires right around them on fire. And it's just not with these facilities, it's with all kinds of them. Every place we have a facility like that, we have a huge vacancy because it empties out the communities. So what I don't understand is why you think that they have a better right to be in our communities than the people who have paid their taxes, that have struggled to even be in these communities because the St. Louis was so racist. They had restrictive covenants where Black people could not live. I don't know why you think people want boarding houses. We have all these problems with boarding houses, not even just these things that you're talking about, the unhoused community. And I don't know why you're expanding special use districts, because special use was for handicapped people that have mental or physical disabilities. It was not supposed to be used for all these things. And you're pouring it in because you want to empty out the city. That's the only thing you can do. And you're protecting the people. You're making everybody feel okay. Well, you're not going to have that because you don't already have it. I don't feel okay because we already have a problem. Everything you're saying does not work. It does not happen. You don't know what you're talking about. You and the president don't know, and nor do you care that it hurts the community. You just continue to push, because that's your idea. The reason why we had things where we involved the alder person in the ward and said, what's good for your ward may not be good for mine. It's that very reason, because you don't know what's good for my ward. You don't know if it's good or not. But after 30-something years, I've been elected to know what's good, and people get fooled with these petitions. And so I've had all these calls saying, they had me signing this stuff. And then people say, well, oh, that's okay. So you're now exempting out the Covenant House of this process and saying, well, you're already there, so you can buy and expand. And then nobody does anything. You go, oh, well, it doesn't work perfectly. Don't give them an out. Hold them to the very responsible demands that you made about tax abatement to businesses to say, if you've had any complaints in the last so many months or year, then you cannot expand. You put nothing in there to protect the people who have lived there longer, because you all are so much on your political woke agenda of where homeless people should live, or where the unhoused should live, or where the animals should live, or where the incarcerated should live, that you have no common sense about where people want to live and why we had zoning in the first place. And absolutely, zoning has been used to hurt the Black community. And that's what this is doing right now, is to hurt the Black community, to give exceptions to where they already are, and then try to push it through. And that's what this is doing. And so my community is going to be having a meeting this weekend and the weekend after that, because we're going to make some decisions about what we do for people who do this kind of thing and push it and say, this is good for you. We're protecting everybody else, but this is okay for you. The first thing should have been in your board bill was that if there has been something put in your community, you do not get to expand, because we already know it came from racism. You're not trying to look out for it. You're trying to cover up and try to pretend like you're speaking for North St. Louis. You're not. You don't live here. I don't think you even own a piece of property. You don't know what it's like for people to be saying, well, I'm just moving because I'm so tired of it. And that's what I hear all the time. So those 20 some odd Black middle class people that are moving out of the city, I'm hearing that in my ward all the time because they're tired of this mess that you guys are doing. You're not looking out for the community. You can continue to say that all you want to. You're playing a political game with people's houses. And it's not just Sharon Tyus' house. It's the ladies that live right up the street from Covenant House that have been there and had to fight to get there and have to put up with all of this mess. And you guys keep pushing more and more and more instead of holding the people accountable. Until you have a way to hold nuisances accountable, you should not be promoting the expansion of all of these things, and you should not be changing the residential use. And I am adamantly opposed to it. And I would say that I had white people coming to my meeting that lived in South St. Louis saying, we're not for this, and sent me emails and stuff and saying, why are we doing this? And I would say that because we have a group of people now who don't care about anybody but their own agenda and don't understand about what is in the best interest of the city, trying to build the people up. Right now, the thing that we have the lowest commodity on is people who want to stay in this city. And we keep doing things to run them out, and then we're surprised that we've gone from 1 million to 500,000 to 400,000 to under 300,000 now. We will not have anybody left in this city if we keep doing this stuff. And I am opposed to this, and I'm asking for a roll call, and I would ask the mayor to veto this bill.
Any further discussion on Board Bill 114 as amended? Alderman from the 1st.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, and thank you for letting me speak again on the bill. This has been a process that's gone on for over a year now. I was very vocally against the first few bills that Alderman Saunier brought forward, against the next set of bills, and each time that these bills would come forward, Alderman Saunier would come and talk to my community and talk to me and try to figure out where we could find movement forward. So I just really appreciate that mentality. Like I said in committee, it's like instead of closing the door, she opened it even wider. So I really appreciate that kind of collegial relationship down here, even though I worked so hard against your previous bills. So I appreciate that we can still work together on other things and found a way to move forward today. So thank you again, and I will be supporting this today.
Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. I want to echo the sentiments of my colleague from the 1st that, I worked against some of your previous legislation, and I think that this is a much better piece of legislation, particularly with many people raised and many of my neighbors and constituents raised. But at the same time, the same people who were concerned about large congregate shelters, they didn't share those concerns about domestic violence shelters. They didn't share those concerns about shelters for women and children who were, escaping bad situations or who found themselves homeless. They didn't feel that same way about people who needed a place to live while they were engaged in alcohol treatment or drug treatment, being supervised by the courts. They were concerned about large groups of homeless men living across the street from their single-family A house. I do understand the Alderman from the 12th's concern with that situation. I've been quite honest with you about that the whole time. This bill isn't perfect, but I think it's a step in the right direction. I would certainly work with the Alderwoman from the 12th on addressing any of the situations that she brings up in the future to make this a more equitable bill. With that, would the Alderwoman from the 7th yield for a few questions?
Alderman from the 7th will yield to questions from the Alderman from the 4th.
Absolutely.
Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you. I told my constituents that I was going to ask you a few of these questions so that anyone who has these concerns can pull up the footage and hear us having this discussion. So now that these two amendments are in the bill, we're looking at what I assume will be the final version of this bill with the perfection vote coming. Does this affect plat and petition in any way, or will people still have the opportunity to opt out of plat and petition, opt out of signing to have one of shelters in their near their home?
It does not touch plat and petition in any way. They have to do plat and petition to initiate anything.
Do these shelters still need to go through the conditional use process?
Yes, with the exception of now with the amendments we've had, the not allowed ones will have to go to the Board of Adjustment process, large congregate shelters in zones A and B, but everything else, yes, will absolutely go through the conditional use process.
So, and with this amendment, it would not allow congregate shelters in A and B, any new congregate shelters, I should say, in A or B residential.
Not in our zoning code, no.
Okay. If I were, this is a long bill, if I were to hit Control F in it, am I going to find anything about a Bill of Rights?
No.
Am I going to find anything about public urination or defecation?
No.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Alderman from the 12th. Oh, I'm sorry, Alderman from the 11th.
11, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, or Vice President. Well, I'd just like to address something that my colleague in the 4th just said about domestic violence shelters. You will never know the location of a domestic violence shelter. That's highly coveted, secretive information. So that being said, and I must concur with the Alderwoman from the 12th, we live this. Our stakeholders, our residents, who pay for everything in their community. They have the responsibility for the maintenance of their homes and everything, but they don't seem to have the right to be able to shape and say what it is that they want in their community. This has been said over and over and over again. I must look out for the constituents that I serve, who have made their voices very loud and very clear. I cannot support this bill, and I would like to amend and ask that the 11th Ward be 100% excluded. Thank you.
Alderwoman, just a point of clarification, you'd have to write an amendment to the bill if you want anything.
I shall do that forthwith.
Okay, thank you. Alderman from the 14th. Okay. I see her hand raised. The Alderwoman from the 11th had the first time speaking. So Alderman to the 12th, or Alderwoman from the 12th, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. First of all, you don't have to have a written amendment. It can be a friendly amendment that's verbal, and she's made a verbal amendment that you can say, she can say she's not going to accept it, but you don't have to have everything in writing. So I would second her amendment. I would second what she said and add the 12th Ward to it as a friendly verbal amendment, because if you all think that's so great and you want to do it, then do it in all the rest of the city and leave the 11th and the 12th alone, because we don't want it. And we represent now 2/3. And I'm going to be quiet because I see the Alderwoman from the 13th, so I'm going to yield to her because I want to come back.
Thank you, Alderwoman from the
Alderwoman from the 13th, you're recognized.
Thank you. I did speak to the sponsor in detail, and pretty much what Alderwoman Tyus stated, I told her that. I also told her I have issues with building, zoning, conditional hearing. I said, because you all have these things in place and they're not enforced. And so we have people that are not following guidelines and they're still in business. Nothing is happening to them. And so they keep saying, well, they have the signature. I'm in agreement. We don't have the signatures mean nothing. We have businesses that are popping up, don't even go through the process. We got boarding houses. We got all this stuff going on. And so I told her I couldn't support. I said, I can't support this because I have too many questions in regards to this, and I don't believe that it's going to help North St. Louis. I have people that are flighting out of North St. Louis. I have vacant properties in areas that were solid communities because we can't get stuff done and the issues are not being addressed. So I applaud her for the work she's done, but I just think it's more work that needs to be, taken and done in regards to this bill. Because I'm getting calls also. I was on the calls with the group with the homeless and the unhoused people, and they are not happy. They said, no, this is not right how this is being done. So I can't support this. Thank you.
Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members, Mr. Vice President, and members of the board. I just also want to stand first in support of this legislation and thank the Alderwoman from the 7th on this piece of legislation she's been working on. I echo my colleagues from the 1st and the 4th of, this has been a long process and trying to work with all her colleagues, I think, get to a place where the legislation is at least feasible and have been able to answer concerns. Maybe not 100%. I don't think there's ever 100% where everybody agrees at the board, but have been able to work throughout the last year. I know she said over and over again, she would love to meet with people. I know she's she's come to my neighborhood. She's come to other neighborhoods. And even as the Alderman of the 13th said, she's been having conversations with colleagues to try to get them in a place where at least all our concerns throughout the city of St. Louis, understanding that we represent different parts, are at least being addressed. So I'm asking my colleagues to support this. I think, Alderwoman, I want to let you know I appreciate your work that you have put into this. Even me, I've had concerns with your piece of legislation. I think sometimes there's a narrative out there that they try to group us all in one, but I wasn't 100% when you brought this forward because of the density, regardless of what folks want to say. I know in my ward that is north of Delmar that represents Black people, they are also upset with how many shelters. As I've always say, we have the most. We want to talk about just the one downtown with Larry Rice, but we also have St. Patrick's Center that does a lot of work with the unhoused. We also have Gateway 180 in North St. Louis, which is the only family shelter that allows women and children to be together in the city of St. Louis. We had Peter and Paul open up recently over in St. Louis Place neighborhood where people was concerned because they did not come to my community and speak to them about their operations and what they was going to do and all of that. But we was able to come together as a neighborhood. One thing I can say, I think the 14th Ward alone has shared and done our part of with how many facilities we have. I think this piece of legislation can open it up to make sure that other parts of the ward, particularly south of Delmar, are also taking on that responsibility. Even when you look at tiny homes, we have tiny homes in the 14th Ward at Delmar and Jefferson. So we've done, I would say, in my ward as much as we can. But you came over to the community that had concerns about Peter and Paul opening up, and you came to Old North, that is close to St. Louis Place neighborhood, where they had a joint meeting to talk about exactly what your legislation would do. And one of the issues was density, making sure that these pieces, or not these pieces, but these shelters have some density so that they cannot continue to pop up over and over and over in one ward. So there is a process at the board. I feel like, you've done your due diligence. If folks, have concerns, I think that's why the floor is here. That's why committee is here. That's why we've seen 2 amendments in committee beforehand, because I know they spoke with you, you spoke with them. We've seen 2 amendments on the floor and that's doing the work and working with your colleagues to actually try to get to a place that is reasonable. So I would just urge all my colleagues I know have been talking to the Alderwoman of the 7th to support this piece of legislation. It's not perfect, but I do believe it is, as the Alderman from the 4th said, just to be clear, has nothing to do with plat and petition, has nothing to do with defecation in the middle of the streets. I think that those were older bills. We're talking about what's in front of us right now, the language that's in front of us. It has nothing to do with unhoused Bill of Rights. It is about special residential uses and how we can be able to operate within those. So again, thank you for your leadership on this, and just want to say thank you. And I'll be supporting it, and I think North and South alders from across the city of St. Louis, you will see support on it because thank you.
Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President and members of the board. Sorry, no good deed goes unpunished. After spending a week tending to my sick parents, I am now sick. So apologies that I can't be there today. I wanted to really commend the Alderwoman from the 7th Ward with her work on this. I know that over the last year, she has continually reached out to every member of this Board of Aldermen, asking to have conversations about this bill, asking to hear feedback, and we've seen that play out through this process, both with a very different bill that was introduced this time around than just about a year ago, and then numerous amendments both in committee and some more on the floor today. I think what we know is that just saying no is very easy to do. Coming to the table with solutions, being able to work through disagreements in productive ways with other members of the board is a much harder thing to do. And I want to commend the Alderwoman from the 7th for her perseverance on being able to have difficult conversations with Alder people, with their constituencies, being willing to go across this entire city and listen to folks, while also recognizing that doing nothing, maintaining the status quo when it comes to our unhoused community is not an option. We have seen an increase in the number of unhoused people in our city, not just in our city, but nationally. This is a problem as rental rates have continued to increase. We are in a situation where our 20% of our kids in our public schools are unhoused or are struggling with housing instability. And we know the impacts that has on learning and the ability to do well in school if you don't know where you're going to be sleeping that next night. And so I really want to just make sure that we commend the Alderwoman from the 7th for the willingness to have difficult conversations, commend members of the Board of Aldermen, Alderwoman Schweitzer in particular, willing to, come in and have some difficult conversations and reach some consensus, which I know is not always an easy thing to do. And I, just want to also make sure that we are addressing misconceptions about our unhoused community as well. I know it's really easy to kind of other people who maybe have different life experiences than ourselves. And I know that, as somebody whose father was unhoused when he was growing up, because my grandfather walked out on my grandma with 5 kids, and he spent most of his high school in and out of pay by the week hotels and out of sleeping out of the car. And unfortunately, that's still a reality for a lot of people in our community today. And while I think it's easy to look at people who might be struggling with disdain or with judgment, The fact of the matter is our unhoused community is more likely to be victims of crime than they are perpetrators of crime. And being on the streets is one of the most unsafe places that a person can be. And so while I think that this will not be a silver bullet, this is a positive step toward getting standardized processes in place for our cities. Again, we're not touching plat and petition through this process. We are making sure that communities still have a voice in that way, while also making sure that there is a standardized process for all of these special residential units, that we are working to deconcentrate these types of properties from all being in one area. And I think that through the myriad of conversations and consensus building that has happened over the past year, we have gotten this bill into a place where most concerns have been addressed. And there's never going to be a perfect bill. I think on controversial issues like this, where people are 100% happy with every single aspect of it. And I think that the Alderwoman from the 7th did a phenomenal job of listening to concerns of her colleagues and of their communities, and amending the bill, changing the bill multiple times to get it to a place where it's able to work. So just want to again thank the Alderwoman from the 7th for her work, especially as a freshman legislator. It's not an easy thing to do, to take on a difficult and controversial topic such as this. It's not an easy thing to travel around the city and talk to various constituencies. It's not an easy thing to do, to have heated conversations with colleagues at times. But I think that's what leadership is, and just want to commend her for getting this to a place where I think most people can agree we have addressed most of the biggest concerns while still moving the ball down the court in a way that we need to. So thank you, Alderwoman from the 7th.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
The Alderwoman from 13th had her hand up first, I think. I'll wait.
You've had it up since we had the Alderman from the 14th, and then, okay.
I'll yield because I've already spoken twice.
Okay, Alderwoman from the 13th.
Yes, sir. Could you remove my ward from this bill, please? I don't support this.
Okay. You would need an amendment. Or you would have to make a motion for a friendly amendment, but the sponsor of the bill would have to consent to a friendly amendment.
Okay, I'd like to make if the sponsor would yield.
Alderwoman from the 7th will yield to questions from the Alderwoman from the 13th.
Yes, sir. I couldn't get my amendment to send. That's how I can go.
Questions or a friendly amendment?
Email.
Friendly amendment.
Alderwoman Tyus, you're not on mute.
Okay. Sorry.
So, do you consent to
questions
yielding?
Or friendly amendment? I think she was clarifying what her intentions
were. A friendly amendment.
Objection.
The Alderwoman from the 7th objects to friendly amendment. Alderwoman, you'd have to put an amendment before us for a motion to approve if you want to move forward with that.
Okay, no problem.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
I should have had 11, 12, and 13.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Alderwoman.
I'm sorry. I'm talking with the clerk. I just sent in an amendment, but only part of it came. So if you could just give me another, I still want to say something, but I want to finish this with the clerk. So I want to.
Okay. The Alderman from the 9th has not yet asked or made a remark. So are you planning to speak on the bill, Alderman?
Yeah.
Alderman from the 9th, you're recognized.
Thank you. I just want to speak to this because I hear some concerning language being bandied about. And while I understand that this subject can be a sensitive one, I think we're losing the humanity in this conversation. I think we get uncomfortable when we see people who are unhoused out on the street because it reminds us that we are all one or two mistakes away or accidents away from housing instability. I think it is a reminder of the abyss that we can fall into when things go wrong in life. It could be a car accident. It could be a genetic condition. It could be an addiction. All of these things happen to good people. All these things happen to people you know. They happen to family members. I think a lot of us have family members who are at one time homeless. And I think this is a very modest change. I think when we look at this bill, we see an effort to clear up some of the code in our city that is outdated, that is complicated, that sends people in a circular and kind of repetitive process. When you look at this bill, really the purpose is not to make it easier to open shelters, it's to make a more predictable process. Indeed, if you read the letter that was sent with this bill when it went through the Planning Commission back in October, quoting directly from this letter, the updated proposal is not aimed at making it easier for special residential to open in the city. Rather, it intends to create a more clear and predictable zoning pathway in which special residential uses will be evaluated and permitted, preserve opportunities for community input, that's preserving plat and petition, and provide the city with more transparency into shelters and transitional housing facilities. The operational plan that is required in this bill is an excellent step to give the city more control over the kinds of facilities that open, making sure that they are not harming the communities that they're in. And while this says it isn't intended to make it easier to open special residential uses, I hope we do get some more out of this, because I think at the end of the day, if we don't want to see homeless people on the corners of our streets, then we need to give them homes. We need buildings for them to be in and have shelter over their heads, just like you would want shelter if you suddenly ended up without a place to stay. And lastly, I just want to speak on my experience in my ward, which also has a lot of special residential uses in it. The Ninth Ward has the second most amount of affordable housing in the city, something that people generally forget because they think we're just the wealthy Central West End, but the Central West End actually has a huge amount of affordable housing in it. And what we find from the affordable housing and the special residential uses like boarding houses and transitional shelters and homes, what we find is that those people, when they're given that stability, they can get back on their feet. They can get back into a job. Groups like Doorways, Independence Center have facilities in my ward, and they deal with people who are severely mentally ill, the kinds of people that often people are very afraid of having near them. But they help keep people on their medicine. They help people report to their jobs so that they can earn a living. And then we don't have a problem with those people causing disruptions in our city because they're unmedicated or they don't have a home to go back to. So that's all to say that if this city wants to actually solve this problem, if we actually want to care for people, then we have to pass bills like this in order to create some sort of predictable pathway to these opening. And, preserving community input, making sure that we're not harming the people that already live in these neighborhoods. So I'm proud to support this bill. I think that the amendments being made so far that have been made to it have been thoughtful and have been trying to address people's concern. The last thing I'll say is that I am opposed to any amendments that would exempt wards. That's not how we do zoning in the city, and I don't think you can even do that in the zoning code. We are amending the zoning code here. That is the types of zoning in our city. It does not matter per ward. It is the zoning that exists in each ward. There's been plenty of time to look at this bill and amend it to address certain issues, and that's why we were able to have amendments prepared today, because there was a meeting at the Planning Commission again, back on October 7th. Then we had 2 committee meetings on this. And then now we're here. So there's been plenty of time to engage, and I've had residents reach out to me. That's what has led to some of these amendments that we've supported today. So I just, again, want to thank the sponsor for having those conversations. I think that, when we look at these issues, we see division and we hear some ugly things sometimes, but this is not about that. So if we pass this today, and if a special residential use wants to open on your block, I hope you listen to the petitioner. I hope you talk to them, ask them your concerns, ask them your questions, figure out how they're going to operate. Because I promise you, at the end of the day, these are resources for communities. These are the things that actually help prevent those nuisances that we're trying to eliminate. So at the end of the day, we have to open our hearts and our minds to the needs of the city. And a simple administrative zoning change like this is really trying to just create that predictable pathway for people. So again, thank you to the sponsor, and I yield back my time.
Alderwoman from the 11th.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. So, everybody has a story. I, too, have had family members, close friends, who have had some circumstances where they had to endure homelessness. That doesn't make these North Side wards villains. What it makes us is advocates for our constituents. Our community for over 50 years now have been the dumping ground for this city. And it is time that we speak up and say no more. You cannot continue to put these burdens in the 11th, which was formerly the 21st Ward, the 12th Ward, the 13th Ward. We have to, at some point, stop being tone deaf to the people that are our residents, that are our bosses, that pay our salaries. That doesn't mean that you're not compassionate. All of us have a story. All of us have people. But until this thing can be done equitably across our city, and I get so sick of hearing the word transparency because we know that it does not exist on this board. It does not exist in this city government. So don't keep telling me transparency, because I'm living what we're doing. I'm seeing it in my community, and my constituents are saying outright, no more. They've had enough. It doesn't make sense that we're not listening to our stakeholders. I'm not against homeless people. I've housed homeless people. I've advocated for homeless people. But when I look at my community that is overburdened, when I look at situations where we had a park, Rumbo Park, in the 11th Ward, I immediately began to receive calls over the summer from parents and grandparents, again, stakeholders. The park was taken over. A team was dispatched of social workers, and yes, the police, and also people who were dressed in hazmat clothing to pick up drug needles, clean up urine, clean up feces, so that children would be able to use a park that was designed for them, families who live in that community. Housing was offered, and the people who had taken over this park have the right to refuse housing, and they did. I have a similar situation near O'Fallon Park. I have several houses throughout my ward that have been broken into and have squatters in it and creating a lot of problems. This is not new in North St. Louis. This is commonplace. And I have to stand up for the people who pay the bills, So, yes, exclude the 11th ward. Yes, exclude the 12th ward. Exclude the 13th ward. We've had more than our share. We've got more than our share right now that we are working with our government leadership to try to manage and still respect the rights of our stakeholders. We are not tone deaf. We hear the people who speak to us. And I don't know of any constituent in my ward who will tell you, oh yeah, I want this. Yeah, bring this to where we live. No, they're not. How many of these places are on Holly Hills? Who's the alderman for Holly Hills? How many of these places in your ward? You know, this is a real problem. And it's been, like I said, the dumping ground has been in North St. Louis. So until you're going to put it in places where it traditionally has not been allowed, and those constituents are saying, oh yeah, put it here, because we know it's not going to happen. No, I don't want it in the 11th ward. No, I don't want it in North St. Louis, because we already have it there. And it's unregulated, and it is not enforced, and it will not be enforced. The city right now does not have enough people, personnel, to enforce pretty much just about anything that we need right now. There's a severe deficit in enforcement. And one of the things I always say about when you have laws, rules, policies that you don't enforce, what you have is literature. If this stuff was going to actually be enforced, I might be in favor. But again, I'm not going to go against my constituents. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
Mr. Vice President, members of the board, I want to say amen to the alderwoman from the 11th, but to expound. I heard the alderman from the 9th talk about listening, have some compassion, but nobody down here has compassion for 3 Black women that represent most of North St. Louis. They bring up the alderwoman from the 7th who doesn't live in North St. Louis. They bring up the alderman from the 14th and says, I do too live in North St. Louis. He lives downtown near the corner of North St. Louis. But the majority of North St. Louis is represented by 3 Black women, the 11th, the 12th, and the 13th. And I've been here longer than anybody, so I want to tell the people who talk about compassion. We used to have something called Echoes Children Home, and it was for the young people and children who didn't have a place. And we worked with them all of the time. We worked to expand because they had a campus. They were run effectively and correctly. They didn't have a building that was bunched up on top of houses. They had a campus. They had a school. They had a cafeteria. They had dormitories, so much so that when they expanded, I helped build the dormitory. We did a double-sided dormitory so that both sides looked like the first, like the front of a house, because it was facing single-family houses. All the people came in. Nobody had any problems with it. They didn't have 90, 100 complaints. It had been there for a long time. The people were very sensitive to the community. They worked in.
Alderwoman, you're muted.
I didn't mute me. So they said you guys muted me. People I find insensitive.
Alderwoman, you're muted.
Somebody is muting me. I don't have anything near my mouse is not near to mute, so somebody from your end is muting me. The people that I find insensitive are the people who get up on the floor and have a nerves to say we are insensitive and haven't walked in my shoe not one time, who are so woke that they know what's good for the whole city. Why is that? Because it did not bother them, because what they needed to be fixed was fixed. And so the rest of it doesn't make any sense. You're insensitive to my senior Black people who live in my community, and white, because I have a white guy, one of the people who is most adamantly opposed to Covenant House lives right across the street from him, and he's white. He's been in the neighborhood for a long time, and he can give you a chapter and verse of all the things that we have had to put up with. And this was a school that my husband went to school when he was a young person. It was Blessed Sacrament Grade School. At 3 o'clock, everybody went home and it was quiet. We have never had peace and quiet in our neighborhood since Covenant House has come to be. Yet you put an exception in here to let them expand and go about it, even though they are terrorizing our community. You don't care. You're talking about, well, have some compassion. Do you have any compassion for the older black people who live there, or the white guy that lives there who's calling me all the time about the blasting of the music, which I live across the street from it and I can hear it 2 or 3 houses down? Do you have any sensitivity to the breaking into people's houses? Have any sensitivity of cars being broken to? Just a month and a half ago, caught the kids trespassing. Actually have pictures of them drinking, doing drugs. People have camera pictures of them having sex. Why are they still open? Because it was forced down into our community. In fact, John Kohler sat on the original hearing for Covenant House, and he said, well, nobody wants it, but it's got to be someplace. So the got to be someplace is North St. Louis. And this is so interesting because what has happened with this is it started under Francis Slay. That was the great push under the Slay administration to push everything north. And really interesting is that people from North St. Louis or downtown who had differing viewpoints all agreed about one thing, that it was being pushed to North St. Louis. So when James Page came down, was the alderman from the 5th, he said, oh my God, I used to hear you talking about this. But he also represented part of actual downtown North St. Louis. And he said, oh, everything is being pushed here. Now, he had beaten Tamika Hubbard, who was the alderwoman from the 5th. She had the same fight. I've had the fight. Everybody in North St. Louis can tell you the fight. What's interesting is before they closed Larry Rice down with gentrification, the things that I have in my community, I didn't have. The homelessness wandering, we didn't have it. Once they closed Larry Rice, because the people who moved downtown where there was already an open facility said, we can't put up with this, and they were able to get rid of it. Because the Slay administration and the Cruzen administration continued to push people in North and even to near North. It was muted again. Tamika Hubbard, the alderman from the 5th, went to war about it. James Page, the alderman from the 5th, went to war about it. The alderman from the 3rd, alderwoman from the 20th, alderwoman from the 1st, just on and on, the 27th, on and on and on. These places were pushed. And so nobody has said, before we think of some way to solve it that makes South St. Louis happy and the Central Quarter happy, we got to look to the people who have been the most affected. If we have been the people who have had the homeless and all the shelters and things put in our area, then why aren't we rectifying that? Why aren't we saying, no, you can't have any more? No, we're not doing that. And that was the whole point. And that's why we have somebody with a black, brown face bringing this bill, so that it's not somebody with a white face, so that there's not a problem saying it's racist. But it is racist. It is racist to do this to our community. It is racist to nobody pushes and says, we want the hardware store right now. We want this. We want what's in North St. Louis, the things that people do not want, or that they are tricked into doing, and then go, oh my God, that's what I was signing. Oh, I didn't know I was signing that, because people will lie. People will cheat. They will do everything. In fact, Covenant House got moved what is now the 7th Ward and used to be the 7th Ward. Or no, I'm sorry, it's now the 8th Ward maybe, or the 7th, one of those two. And it's now the 7th Ward. And it got moved because it was a problem. Who in the world thinks that how you fix a problem is, oh, we move it out of the Central Quarter or downtown. We just move it over to North St. Louis because the problem is fixed, because those people don't deserve to have quiet and enjoyment of where they live. So when you ask me about who concern am I most concerned with, It's the Black people who made a way for me to even live where I live. It's the ones that had to fight Shelley v. Kramer, which said you couldn't come across this line. It's the Black people who used to live in Mill Creek and was moved to the Ville. It's the Black people who had to then move up. And I now have Shelley v. Kramer house in the 4600 block of Labadie in what is now the 12th ward. Those are the people I'm worried about. Am I worried? Do I want people to be unhoused? No, I do not. But I don't want it to be where they are allowed to create a place where they are making the people who live in my community move or uncomfortable. Why don't we just have a board bill that says until we get equal amount of unhoused and whatever all these shelters and things in the rest of the city, then we don't put any more in North St. Louis, because that would not pass the board. So for you to get on your high horse and try to say, I'm opposed this, and this is what you should have done. First of all, that's what the floor of the Board of Aldermen perfection is for, to bring perfections. So I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear about how we are not compassionate. You're not compassionate to the people who live in my community. You're not compassionate when you come over to my community with somebody who's not an alder person and try to push your agenda, because that's her agenda too. She cares about the unhoused, but she doesn't care about the house because she also doesn't own anything. It is so interesting to me that the people who are pushing this bill, how many of them own real estate in the North St. Louis? And I will tell you, and live in that, none to one. And how many of them represent the people here? None to one. You don't represent them.
Alderman,
Point of order.
What's your point of order, Alderman?
We're in violation of Rule 38. We're not debating the subject, like the actual bill here. We're debating a subject that's very broad. We're apparently using disparaging remarks about our members, saying who they care about and who they don't. We need to keep the discussion pertinent to the bill and make sure we're asking questions about the actual bill that's in front of us, the text that's in 114 as amended. And that's my point of order.
Alderman, could you please contain your remarks to Board Bill 114 as amended?
I will do that right when the Alderman from the 9th withdraws his sanctimonious statements about making sure that we care and that we're sensitive and all of that. You don't get to make sanctimonious remarks and then don't have them replied to. You should have kept it only to saying, Board Bill 15777 says. You did not do that, Alderman from the 9th, and that's why I'm replying. And it's on tape, you saying that. So I will continue to reply to say that I am representing my community. I am representing Miss Rose. I'm representing Miss June. I'm representing Miss Gwen. I'm representing all of the people who have lived there for years and years and years on the streets, attached to this board, attached to Covenant House. And then they have to find out that we have something giving them the right to expand. And they don't want that. So I'm representing that. And I'm representing the fact that people are saying that we're the people, the 3 Black women in North St. Louis somehow don't care about what happened. We do care about what happened. I'm representing the fact that we now should have an amendment. And I heard the Alderman from the 9th say that we shouldn't be doing amendments to a board bill about zoning that takes wards out. We shouldn't be giving exceptions to people, but we got all kind of exceptions in here. So if you don't want to do the amendment and you don't want to vote for it, then don't. But if the 3 alderwomen from that represent North St. Louis tell you they don't want their board bill, they don't want their wards in this board bill as it is written, then who are you to say that we're not speaking for our community and that it's a better thing? Then the alderwoman from the 7th.
We don't have the amendment before us currently, so you should keep your comments to 114 as amended, unless you're planning to introduce.
I'm sorry, I was told that it is in the trying to get this.
We do have the amendment on our desk, but we are not currently discussing the amendment because there's not been a motion before us to put the amendment before us for discussion. So if you want to make a motion.
I will do that in a minute. I wanted to make sure it was on our desk, okay?
It is.
Okay, so I would like to make a motion to amend Board Bill 114 as amended in committee with amendment number 4, and it's sponsored by Alderwoman Tyus, Keys, And Boyd?
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 12th Ward. Is there a second?
Second.
There's been a second by the Alderman from the 13th that we adopt amendment number 4 to Board Bill 114 as amended. Any discussion on amendment number 4? Alderman from the 7th.
Thank you so much. I rise in objection to this amendment. Again, if you read the text of this amendment, it says until the building commissioner says that it is feasible to do it or the city is able to do it. I think it's really important that in the event that this bill is perfected today, we do stick to what we agreed to with the building commissioner and with the folks who have to implement and enforce this. And Mr. Ware has been very clear that he wanted 6 months or until he deemed that it was feasible. Again, as a sponsor who's actually been working with the departments and having these conversations now for over a year, I think it's very important that we vote no on this amendment. And I think if anyone wants to propose amendments, especially in regards to departments, I would encourage departmental conversations to happen so that they have a heads up, because they will be the ones that have to implement it. And so again, I would urge us to vote no on this amendment. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
I'm sorry. I'm going to wait till everybody else has spoken. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 11th.
You may vote against this amendment, but people are listening. They're watching. And I want to make sure that they understand that this city has not done this thing equitably, a long history of not doing this in the right way, and there's no faith that they will start now. Again, I say North St. Louis continues to deal with this problem, and we've had the full-blown breadth of the weight of this issue. Doesn't mean that we are insensitive and I just am really, excuse my French, pissed off that we have other alders who want to vilify us for saying this is where we live. The people in my ward look like me. How dare you believe that you know what's best for the people I represent, the people where I live, the people who elected me. How dare you? I would not dare cross the line and say that something should be in a South Side ward or a Central Corridor ward, and they say that that's what's best for them. And that's what is happening here. This has gone on far too long, and I'm really sick and tired of it. You may vote against this amendment, but I hope that the public at large is paying attention to the people who are voting for something that people are clearly saying. I am in contact with my constituents every day. My office is not down here at City Hall. My office is the 11th Ward, and my constituents will tell you that I am there every day. So I believe that I am eminently qualified to speak on behalf of what the people in my ward want and do not want. Make sure that the people in your ward, since you say you want this, make sure that they are okay with you having this in your ward. But I'm telling you, the people in my ward have spoken over and over again, enough. Thank you.
Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. Will the Alderwoman from the 11th yield for question?
No, I will not.
Well, I find it interesting that an Alderwoman who wants to ask us to vote for an amendment not yield for question. Will the Alderwoman from the 12th yield for question?
Alderwoman from the 12th, will you yield to questions from the Alderman from the 14th?
Yes.
Thank you. Maybe since Alderwoman from the 11th can't explain this and yield, maybe you can help me with this. So, Alderwoman, what is your amendment doing by striking out the 11th, 12th, and 13th ward. Is it going back to the current process that already exists with residential units or special residential?
It is.
Okay.
It is.
So only thing
And
this.
it is doing that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
So,
I'm sorry.
no,
I'm
you.
sorry.
Go ahead.
No, you were talking. I'm sorry. I spoke over you.
Appreciate the respect. And I know you're virtual, so you probably can't. It's probably a little lag. So I totally get it. I don't believe you was talking over me. I just want to confirm by striking out or taking out the 11th, 12th, and 13th. This is just saying you would rather exist with the current process that already exists for special residential units than this process that at least the building commission, the zoning body, and the administration have all come together and said this is something that would actually make it more easy to be able to catch some of these special residential use when they are trying to open up. Not to expand, I know that's what you talked about earlier, but open up.
Can I answer?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I? Oh, okay, because it's some kind of weird lag going on. So I'm sorry. Okay, it's really dragging now. Yes, that is what I'm saying. For one thing, because let's start with the expansion. That is the major thing. That's what a lot of this is about. This is about Covenant House, who lied to get into my community, and it has been the bane of my existence, okay? It's also about all the other places that have been placed in my community. So the new procedure does not work for us. And it also is about that the alderwoman from the 7th said that this will not become effective until 6 months from now. And it really says it shall not become effective as soon as technically feasible as determined by the building commissioner, but no later than 6 months from now. Okay, so to me, it would have been better to just say that it wouldn't become effective until 6 months from now. And then we would still deal and look at ways if there were still problems. So that was one thing. The other thing is that I told you, I think that they should not have passed any kind of bill that the 11th, 12th, and 13th ward are not somehow protected from any additional things. And
Got
I will
you.
say again,
If I could ask, I hear you on that part.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Since with the floor, I just want to ask, did you have conversations with the alderwoman from the 7th ward about this piece of legislation as it has been announced for weeks and has been filed for months about this legislation, about your concerns when at least come to the 12th ward?
I told her from before this, so you, and I don't know if you were there, but she, and I believe the alderman from the 9th, she's been all over the ward. She didn't want to have a conversation with me. When you come over in the ward and just decide, I'm going to just do what I want to, you don't want to have a conversation with the alderperson. I know you guys, you want respect. You didn't feel like that it was respectful. You said when somebody was introducing a board bill about naming a street or a building.
Alderwoman, that's not the, we're not talking about that board bill.
Oh, we didn't talk about it.
Okay, thank you. That's my question. Thank you. I got the floor. Thank you.
She was disrespectful.
Thank you. That was my question.
But I told her from the beginning that I did
I
not
end this inquiry with you, Alderwoman. Thank you.
bill about changing.
I end the inquiry with the Alderwoman from the 12th.
Alderwoman.
I end the inquiry with the Alderwoman from the 12th.
Okay, and I'll answer it at the end.
Thank you. Will the Alderwoman from the 13th yield for questioning?
Alderwoman from the 13th, will you yield to questions from the Alderman from the 14th?
Yeah, I'll yield.
Thank you, Alderwoman. I appreciate you yielding for questions. You did state, though, earlier, at least when you was talking, that you did have conversations with the Alderwoman and you brought your concerns to her about this piece of legislation that's in front of us, correct?
I did.
When you had those conversations, now being a sponsor of this amendment, did you bring wanting to be excluded out when you had conversations with the Alderwoman from the 7th of being excluded from her bill?
I did. I told her I could not support this because I need to do some research.
So when you say not support this, your amendment saying that you want to be removed from the bill that was just dropped in front of us today. My question is, did you have that conversation with the Alderwoman prior to this amendment being filed that you wanted to be removed? completely with the bill. I hear you saying you have concerns.
No, if I tell you I don't support it, I'm not going along with the bill. I made that clear.
Got you.
So
But there,
I don't want to be a part of that, because at the end of the day, I don't think you're the person that should be asking those questions. She should have been asking those questions. And so I have no other conversation in regards to this.
got you. Well, I'm asking you because this is a new amendment. Saying that you don't want to support a bill is understandable. I mean, there's bills that we haven't supported, but to remove yourself completely from the geographic area is what I'm asking. Was those conversations happening when you had that conversation? I'm assuming she also walked away. Wow, nobody want to answer tough questions, but
The 13th, are you no longer yielding to question?
no, I am my inquiry with the Alderman from the 13th as well. I find it, and I at least disagree or not disagree, at least the Alderwoman from the 12th is willing to answer questions, especially if you're going to propose an amendment at the last minute and can't even speak on it, is very interesting. And maybe the Alderwoman from the 12th should just carry it by herself, because at least she could speak on it. I would ask all my colleagues also not to support this. This isn't how we do zoning. Being able to just exclude yourself completely when there's a full zoning code and just saying, oh, we don't want these wards to be part of it. And then also, again, if you can't speak on it, maybe you shouldn't sponsor it. And I at least commend the other alder people who spoke with the alderwoman ahead of time about the amendment that they had to be able to know exactly what was coming in front of us, what was coming in front of the body. Yes, you can drop an amendment on the floor, but if you can't even speak on your amendment, I don't see the weight it needs to be passed. So thank you, at least Alderwoman from the 12th, for indulging me in my inquiry with you.
President Green.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. I just wanted to point out that this amendment does not exempt those north side wards from having special residential units or shelters open in their community. It preserves the status quo. So it preserves the status quo that has allowed an influx of special residential units to be opened on the north side. By making them exempt from the density language that is now in there. It also would make them exempt from those special residential uses having to present the city with operational plans, even if they're not a city-funded entity, which is something that the bill currently does as well. And so I just want to make sure it's clear for the people at home that this amendment would preserve the current process for the north side, and as in preservation of that status quo, it would take out the current density language that is in the bill that is seeking to put some limitations on the number of special residential uses that can be in one area. So just want to make sure it's clear that that is what this amendment is doing. It is not banning special residential units in those north side wards. It is simply making them exempt from the process that is outlined in this bill.
Alderwoman Boyd, or pardon me, Alderwoman from the 13th.
That's okay. It doesn't make a difference. At the end of the day, when people stand up and ask questions and they have no knowledge of what we deal with in our community, that makes it different. I did have a conversation with the alderperson of the 7th, and I did make it very, very clear to her that I could not support this because of the issues that the alderwoman from the 11th and 12th brought up. But when you, at the end of the day, when you look at our communities, it is continuously being the dumping ground. When you acquire a ward that people are literally living on a whole block out in the cold, I have issues with that because they should be housed. When you hold a meeting as the health director, health person over the health committee, and we're trying in July to address this issue. So now you're pushing and ramming this down people's throat. I just don't think that's fair to our communities. And so it's not that we don't want to support what she's doing. It's we saying we need to go back to the table and look in detail what else needs to happen. How can you commit to you'll have us building inspectors there and we can't get buildings taken care of now? We can't get inspections done now. All we hear is they refer to court, but nothing ever happens. So we continuously have to keep accepting this and thinking it's okay. I don't think so. And no, I did not tell her yesterday when she spoke to me that I would exclude my ward. But as part of the Black Coalition of the Black Alder people in North St. Louis, we came to a decision. We can't keep supporting this, and our community is the one suffering. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the community. First of all, I want to say that the special use has greatly been expanded in this board bill. Special use used to be if there was a mentally or physically handicapped person residing in a thing. Now we're taking special use and putting everything under an umbrella and saying, but you're not going along with that. You're changing the way zoning is done. You're changing the way zoning is done. You didn't come out to the planning commission. How many people on the planning commission live in North St. Louis? I do know that there's one now because there's one been added. And I know that that person lives in North St. Louis. But when this was pushed through, I doubt the names that I saw, none of them lived in North St. Louis. People bring to them their life experience. One of the life experiences in St. Louis has been, that's good enough for North St. Louis. That's for a lot of people. And they let it come out of their mouths all kind of ways like, well, it's got to be someplace. That was from John Kohler when he pushed Covenant House into our community. So when you then say at the last minute, what you're trying to change this, you're changing a lifetime of reliance of how things was done. If they were done fairly, we wouldn't be sitting here. We wouldn't be sitting here with not only myself and the other two Black Alder women saying that this is not right, but the sponsor herself says, oh yes, I want to admit that there is a problem that has been pushed to North St. Louis, but she's not doing anything to make it better. She's not addressing past sins. She's just saying, well, in the future, it won't do this, which makes it real comfortable for the people because there's a wink and a blink saying it's not really coming to your community. We're going to let it just be there where it is. And what we're saying is just take us out. And in fact, I would also say that the building commissioner need not try to implement this for the next 6 months. Because what we need to do is go out and walk a petition and have this ordinance, when the mayor signs it, revoked. We need to go to the people like they like to do and say, look, this is not ever going to go away unless we do some kind of charter change, because they just want to bring stuff and make it happen and leave it there. And I've been through that for 30 something years. I've been through the things where people saying, oh, it's not right. I mean, it's okay. But then there's that little word like acreage. Acreage, you give the money for acreage to the parks, but you don't give the money for acreage to the size of the wards. Those are all the kind of things that if people don't read carefully, they don't see. I do read those things. So we're changing the way special use is. But I don't know if we're really changing them legally, because the state has some ideas about what a special use is. And they also have some laws about zoning and property that is right across the street from a different zone. So just because it's something that's F neighborhood commercial doesn't mean you can do what you want to when it's right across the street from an A. That's why I asked the Alderwoman from the first. And and we also don't seem to be able to understand that the stakeholders in North St. Louis that have stayed, they've had to do that under unreasonable burdens. Just hardships, racism, sexism, ism. And you don't want to hear that because what you want to hear is that, well, this is good. She's made a good effort. And if she hasn't satisfied you three ladies, well, it's your fault, because how about that again? We don't want to do this without having you three ladies on board. So if that means we're not going to put in here that you can go ahead and get another expansion when you have had 30, 40, 50 violations of nuisances, then that means that. If that means whatever, that you don't want so many in any neighborhood, then that should be something you talk about. Because when you talk about you can't have more than two in a block, that's too many. In the first place, right now, I got Covenant House. I have Dismas House right across the street from a park. I have 3 or 4, 5, 6 other ones. I have one that now is closed down because the state rep that's running around with you guys opened it illegally. And as soon as I got to the what used to be the 4th ward, I got 1 million calls from people saying, this is awful. She opened it up illegally. We got people in the alleys. We got this. And then you say, oh, but we got it covered. See, we can make it be okay for you. Can you make it be okay that when we call the police, we can't get the police to respond because we don't have enough? Oh, I'm sorry. We're at defund the police stages. So now we don't have any police. Can you make it be okay when the people set the buildings around on fire and nobody will do anything? Everybody says, well, people just care about the halfway houses and they don't care about some of the other things. Yeah, they care about a lot of the other things. There's a lot of things that you're changing to special use that was not special use. You're leaving that part out. You're changing things and you're saying, oh, we've made it okay for one section of the town. That's what racism has always been about. And that's what zoning has done to Black people's neighborhoods, where they allow stuff. And even when the law says they can't do it, they do it anyway. If you don't believe it, there's a law that says Salamas cannot be at the corner of Kings Highway and Kings Highway and St. Louis Avenue, but it's there. The good things that is happening, though, is the courts are really looking at how violation of zoning laws have been happening. And I want to give a shout out to the former alderman from the 5th, because he's been doing a fabulous job of taking the city to court. And that's what we're going to have to do about how they are so lax about zoning codes and things in North St. Louis. They didn't just get there because we wanted them there. They got there because somebody forced them. And now what you're doing is doubling down and saying, well, that's okay. We don't want to talk about that. Just leave those things right there. Because ultimately, we'll run all those Black middle-class people away from the city. So I won't have to hear Sharon Tyus talk about that anymore, because they won't be there anymore, because they will leave because they get tired of it. And the older Black people who live around all of these nuisances get no justice whatsoever, no matter what color the mayor is. They just go along with it. Ever since 16 years of Francis Slay, 4 years of Lyda Cruzan, and now 4 years of this current mayor, and nobody has been able to address these nuisances. We have the calls, we have the people who've called in, we have the police reports, we have all of this, but nobody can do anything. And then you want to expand and put more things in the community. I get calls about boarding houses all the time. They got all kinds of problems. People saying, well, why are you so worried about boarding houses? You're not worried about it because they didn't allow it. We haven't had good building inspection probably for the last 15 years. And in fact, the vice president has spoken to that problem in his own ward. One of the women that came to my meeting Saturday talked about that she had told the president that this was going to impact unfairly poor communities. She didn't say minorities because she was not a minority, but she said it would affect North St. Louis and poor communities. That would be the Southeast also, southeast part of the city of St. Louis. So we continue to push this agenda like it's all right, and that we don't see the rest of what's going on. We do see it. And all of you all, we tried to tell you that about liquor and alcohol, and the sponsor did finally yield to the fact that we had moratoriums about liquor. And it's a good thing we did, because this board would say, you don't need a moratorium about halfway houses and things. In fact, that's just exactly what we need. We need a moratorium to address how we make it equitable. Why are we trying to say that you can open any more in North St. Louis, no matter what, until we make it equitable? And again, I want to remind everybody, we didn't just get to this party the caucus got to this party back in July of 2021, when we wrote a joint letter to the current mayor saying we got some problems here and we cannot solve them by ourselves. We spoke to what now many cities are admitting. You cannot solve homelessness and these other things with a housing, because there will be more and more and more. And New York learned that lesson, and I watched them learn that lesson, because New York didn't hear when Texas border towns were saying, we can't handle all of this. All you got to do is be overrun by something to know that it's not that you're not caring or care about it, is that you will drown yourself trying to save a drowning person if they're wailing around. So that's what's happening in our communities. We don't get anything that says positive. We don't get the hardware store that was promised to me from this administration, not even done anything on it. We don't even get when people's houses got flooded, got taken care of in Lindenwood, but not in Kingsway West, Kingsway East, or Penrose. Nothing was done from this administration to make sure that the people had their houses bought out. We don't get the fairness of government that's supposed to be a guarantee. We don't get the right to pick our own elected officials when we have a group of Board of Aldermen who can just decide we're going to tear it all up. We don't get people who hear the pain of our people because they say, oh, that's just those 3 alder women. Not saying that we represent anywhere from 21, 22, 24, probably even 25, because a lot of times people don't turn in themselves about when we're doing the Census Bureau, but it could be 20 something to 25,000 people we represent, and that all of us represents long winding wards that are not compact and contiguous at all. And that was done on purpose when they passed back in 2012 to go to 14 wards. All of this continues to compound upon the people in North St. Louis. And all we hear from people is, well, you should have done this. Well, what you should have done is not be trying to change something that is not going to be fair in the impact. And that's what you have not done. You have not said, we will leave these wards out until we have fair distribution of what these different uses. And they're not all special uses. And I don't know if we are even doing correct under the state by calling them all special uses and categorizing them all as special uses. I would submit that we are not, and this is not a good board bill. And so we want to be taken out because we don't want to be part of something. We don't want our people to think that we somehow agreed to it. We didn't. Could it be something better? Yes. Not from the person, the sponsor who's carrying it, because her agenda is, I'm going to get something for the unhoused. That was her agenda. Not I'm going to protect the people who are already housed. That was never her agenda. I'm going to respect that communities have different ideas. That was never her agenda. It's also why we got to close the workhouse, because the mayor had a group of people whose agenda was close the workhouse. Wow.
Alderwoman,
no
just a reminder to keep your remarks germane to amendment number 4, please.
Okay. So anyway, saying all of that, you can vote against this. That's all right. We just want people to know we don't want to be involved with something that's unseemly as this. And so am I recognized to close or not, Chairman?
Alderman, there was another colleague that wanted to make remarks before you close.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
You're fine to close, unless there's any other discussion. I'm not seeing anyone at the mic or with their hand raised. Alderwoman, you may proceed with your closure. Alderman from the 12th, you're recognized to close.
I hear you. That if there's some kind of, I'm saying 2 of me. There's a last. I don't know what is going on, so I'm sorry. I'm trying to deal with this as effectively as possible. I would renew my motion to amend to amend Board Bill number 114 as amended, but with amendment number 4, which basically says that we will remove the entire geographic area of the 11th, 12th, and 13th Ward as designated in Ordinance 71443. And I will ask for the support of the members of the Board of Aldermen.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 12th, seconded by the Alderman from the 11th, that we adopt Amendment number 4 to Board Bill number 114 as amended. There's been a call for roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone.
No.
Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Sanye. No. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning.
No.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys.
Aye.
Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
No.
Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Spencer. 6 aye votes, 7 no votes.
With that, you fail to sustain the motion from the Alderwoman of the 12th on Amendment number 4. Alderman from the 7th, you're recognized on Board Bill number 114 as amended, unless there's further discussion. Oh, Alderman from the 12th, you're recognized.
Not me. Ottawa, I'm sorry, Mr. Vice President, I didn't have my hand up.
Did I say 12th? I second.
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
Yeah, great.
Alderman from the 2nd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. I appreciate the conversation that's taken place here today. Hyper-technically speaking, my observations is this creates a process within the zoning structure. I think where the rub comes in is this will be conflated with solving the city's homeless crisis or issue or problem that exists. I've asked the administration, I've had a conversation with the sponsor who's always been very professional and forthright with me in discussing this bill, that there has to be a percentage of folks who will not seek housing. And in a candid conversation with the sponsor on this, I'm not putting words in her mouth, but she, I think, will admit this, that this bill has the potential to help folks who do want 4 walls, who want to be housed, and work on any personal problems or afflictions that they have. I think largely the citizenry in the city is going to think that homeless shelters and those folks who don't want to be housed, right, those who are permanently camping in rights of ways and in public spaces will be coming to a theater near them. And I think that needs to be compartmentalized in a way that suggests let's have that next conversation about what we do with that percentage of folks. How do we really help them and get them services? Because otherwise we're housed in this zoning conversation. It's been mentioned that this does not touch plat and petition. The answer is for now. It's been mentioned that this adds conditional use permit and an operational plan and has further restrictions for how a special residential use would operate. For now. I think if this passes today, the proponents of this bill and others who are advocates for housing, and God bless them, will throw up their hands in victory, that we're taking a critical step into helping the housing crisis and the homelessness issue in the city of St. Louis. I think it's very marginal, and part of this conversation needs to be, how do we really help the folks who don't want housing? Because there is a percentage of that. I've asked that question to get that number. Does the city have it? I've got no response. If I were to want to take a step further and have unregulated and have more aggressive housing in all zones and in all neighborhoods in the city, I might first create a process that in 6, 8 months, a year's time,
I can change radically. And I think that might be the underpinning here of this legislation.
Any further discussion on Board Bill 114 as amended? Seeing none, Alderwoman. Acknowledged, Alderwoman from the 12th. Alderwoman from the 7th, you're recognized to close.
All right, thank you, members of the board, folks at home watching. What a meeting it has been. I just want to, again, every time we have this conversation, honestly, I know that people are watching this at home. I know that it might look like easy or look like it's not difficult or look like it's not extremely challenging to have these conversations. They are, but certainly what makes them even more challenging is when people are attacking your identity, is when there's personal digs about what you do and don't know, as if anyone has taken the time to get to know you and see where you come from and see what you believe. So in addition to the conversation being difficult, there is a lot of, honestly, just flat out disrespect and personal attacks that I hope as a Board of Aldermen we disencourage. And I hope that at no point, no matter what I say this evening, and regardless of how anyone in this room or any single one of my colleagues vote on this bill, it is never my intention to challenge your identity, and it is never my intention to disrespect you. So I just want to lift that up.
What's your point of order? What does this have to do with please stand at the mic, Alderwoman.
What does this have to do with identity? Excuse me?
You have to state a rule, Alderwoman.
I'm sorry?
You have to state a rule with your point of order.
I'm sorry, I don't have the rule. I do apologize for that. And I will have to bone up on that kind of stuff. But I think that she does need to stay with the...
She has the floor, Alderwoman.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And so I just want to make sure I thank my colleagues as we are in a Board of Aldermen meeting discussing legislation that I talk about the way that we have the discussions, because I think that's absolutely relevant to the conversation. In reference to some of the things that were brought up this evening in discussion, one, I'm glad that we were able to work ahead of time because many of you came to the committee hearings, many of you invited me to your neighborhoods, many of you emailed me and really engaged and collaborated from me. I know some folks have said, well, you don't understand. I cannot understand if we're not able to have conversation, especially when our conversations are limited here. If I'm not able to meet with you, if I'm not able to have a conversation with you, it is impossible for me to understand. But I hope that from every colleague I've worked with who has engaged with me, you do feel as if I've understood. Again, the talks about where I am and where I come from and what I know about, I won't even, speak to that. I know tonight we talked about political agenda, so I want to be 100% clear on what my agenda is. I believe that housing is a human right, and I believe that that should not be limited to just to people have a lease or have a mortgage. If you want to know why we're doing this bill and what agenda is, pick up your phone and call 211 right now. Because I called around noon after being on hold for about 20 minutes, and they said there's not a single bed available. So if you want to know what the political agenda is and what the mission of mine is, despite being disrespected, berated, and called all types of names, and you couldn't imagine the conversations, even going war to war, just some of the things that this topics pull out of people. But I have stood to that and I have continued to do the work because I do think that we have a problem in our city's process and doing nothing is not an option. And so instead what I did is I engaged in our process, engaged with our collaborators. And again, just so we're clear on what the agenda is, I do believe that housing is a human right. I do believe that there are people in this city right now who need a facility. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. Call 211. There is not a bed available. So even if there's someone right now who wants a transitional home, who wants a group home, who needs a bed in a shelter, it's not available. And while some of us may go to bed at night and sleep fine with that being the case and feel like, well, that's not our role, that's not our job, I ran for office because I wanted to be in a position to provide resources for people. And I also want to highlight that there are many folks in our city, and if you want to know what they look like, all you have to do is pull up the HUD's committee, because we were there, I think just for this bill, probably have now had about 5 hours of discussion. And at our last hearing, the last full hour was 3-minute segments of testimony fully in support. And many of those folks stated on a record that they were homeowners. Many of the folks stated on a record that they lived all across the city. And so again, it is not an issue of unhoused or housed. And especially in this political moment that we're in, I think it's so important that we don't create those divisions. It is hard to imagine that when people in your community don't have resources, we all suffer, but we do. It is hard to imagine that every single person who's unhoused, they don't have a mental health problem, they don't have a drug problem. I know there was a comment made, you'll never know where a domestic violence shelter is because that's privately protected. And I'm great for that. But what we also know, if you attended the Housing Summit, if you talk to Dr. Pearson, is that should a woman get out of that domestic violence shelter and she needs transitional housing, where can she go? She doesn't need shelter. She's not quite ready for a lease or a mortgage. She needs a place to transition. And I just said I'll call 211, and there was nowhere to go. And there are many other scenarios like that. So I really think it's important that we have that discussion and centering. And again, I keep hearing nobody wants this. If you want to hear that people want it, you could just come to committee or watch the YouTube video back and you'll hear person after person, or even just pull up the drive, because many people emailed testimony and there was way more testimony and support than against of people saying that they want this. And so if you're curious, there's some support there. Ideas that you want to, empty out the city. Again, if you buy into the notion that helping other folks out who are without hurts the city, that's one way to look at it. That's certainly one perspective. When I look at the city of St. Louis as a Black woman, and I do want to say that again, as a Black woman, as a proud Black woman, because I am, whether people question or not, I'm a proud Black woman, and there are many Black people who share my views, and that's okay. Black people don't have to agree on everything. We have different opinions like every other group of people, but it's certainly unfortunate when that leads to us disqualifying someone's Blackness because they don't share our perspective. But there are many folks who want this. I know.
Alderman from the 12th, what is your point of order?
Rule 41, point of order, please have her stick to the pertinent parts of what she's supposed to be talking about, which is the closing of Board Bill 114 as amended.
Alderman, please keep your remarks to the closing remarks of Board Bill 114.
Absolutely, Vice President. It's interesting because I still haven't talked as long as some other folks have who aren't the bill sponsor. So in addition to, mentions of just a woke agenda, I don't know if thinking that you should make transparent processes, if thinking that, protecting the thing that is plaid and petition that everybody said that they want, if requiring operational plans so that people have all the information they need up front, if having a conditional use process, which means the alder will absolutely get notice and there'll be another public hearing, if putting density language in. Again, I'm not sure what agenda you want to put part of that, but what is in the bill is the agenda to create a clear and efficient process. I also know there's been many comments around specific housing facilities, and I have gotten emails and phone calls from people who operate those facilities. I just want to let the Covenant House know that it is never my goal to specifically target you or say anything negative about you. And I do know that you are the only youth shelter in the city of St. Louis, and you've been funded by the city.
Point of order.
Alderwoman, what's your point of order?
Rule 41, would you stick to the closing of Board Bill 114 as amended?
Alderwoman, she is closing out.
No, she is not.
My decision is that she is speaking germanely to what's before us and closing out and responding to the comments that were made during the discussion on Board Bill 114.
I'm glad we're making
She's
that
closing.
Point. So from now on, I don't want to hear when somebody makes a point.
She is in her closing comments.
You gotta stick to the germane.
And Alderman, I gave you grace as well, please.
I'm going to ask you, point of order again. Point of order that she stick to the comments. Covenant House is not in there unless it really is.
I've made my decision, Alderwoman. You may proceed.
Thank you. I do want to lift up what the alderman from the 9th Ward said about, losing the humanity in the conversation. I think that he made some amazing points. I think that there are a lot of things that are created between us, specifically in regards to economics and what people have and don't have. And I thank God for my diverse economic experiences that have taught me that I'm not too different and I'm never too far away from being where someone is. And specifically in regards to this topic, when you're looking at the statistics of the unhoused, the fastest group of people that are actually becoming unhoused are actually senior citizens. They're not the face of the issue. Of course, they are not. But if you think about how the cost of everything is rising, but folks on fixed income, specifically Social Security, stays the same, it makes a lot of sense. The bulk of women who are unhoused are fleeing domestic violence relationships. The bulk of men who are unhoused are LGBTQ or have served in the military and have certain PTSD and mental health issues. So again, just want to make sure we're speaking about this population with humanity, because there's no one group that is a monolith or that all has the same challenges or things, stopping them from doing things. I also want to make sure that I thank my colleagues for just the robust conversation that happened earlier today. In regards to zoning, it does have to be done by districts. You cannot do it by wards, and you can reference RSMO Chapter 64 for clarity on that. And then again, I know there was also some general comments about this bill won't solve the city's homeless problem. And so I hope everyone hears me clearly that this bill absolutely will not solve the city's homeless problem. It absolutely won't. I don't think a single bill that we passed all session has solved a problem. We've passed legislation on Airbnbs. We've passed legislation on tax abatement. We've passed legislation on a number of things, but not one single bill is going to solve this issue. And similar to that, this bill is not going to solve this issue. And to be honest, as a board, I think that this first conversation, we just had to really talk about a process. It's hard to talk about other things that you want to move forward when the process is operating murky, when there are residents who are rightfully upset at the process because they feel like they don't have notification, when there are us who are, elected leaders that have problem with the process because we feel like we don't have elected notification, or providers or the departments. What I learned when I worked on this legislation, that there really wasn't a single party that was the most clear on the process. And even those of us who may feel like we're not ready to have this conversation yet, it does seem like we do know that it should be a conversation that we have. And in regards to, questions of how do we help folks who don't want housing, I'm glad we're asking that question. I filed that slate of bills so that we could have these conversations. If there's anything within our legislative power that we could do to help anyone, if they're a homeowner, if they're a tenant, if they are unhoused, if they're a human being who needs any form of housing, Alderwoman Sanye is always happy to sit at that table and to be there and to have that conversation. But in reference to this bill, the goals and the tenets are very clear. Right now, a lot of these facilities are not allowed at all in our zoning code. And that leads to a lot of loopholes, that leads to a lot of discrepancies in how the process goes and where it is. And so this bill will allow us to have a process that, again, first of all, you have to do plat and petition. So if no one wants it, hopefully that means they don't get 51 signatures, and when zoning calls to verify it, it won't get verified. But it also makes sure that we have key information that the Department of Human Services have said would be really helpful, that the building commissioner has said would be really helpful, so that there's an operational plan and we can get the information we need available up front and make that available to members. And then there's also some density language that is included in the bill as well. And so just in closing, I really want to again thank everyone, and I can't thank it enough. I know the mayor was mentioned a couple of times, but I really actually want to thank her and thank her administration for working on this bill and for being at the table and being a part of the conversations. And I look forward to getting it to her desk so that she can sign it. Thank you.
Would you like to renew your motion, Alderwoman?
I renew my motion to perfect Board Bill 114 as amended.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we perfect Board Bill 114 as amended.
Roll call.
There's been a request for a roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Aye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys.
No.
Alderwoman Tyus.
No.
Alderwoman Boyd.
No.
Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
10 aye votes, 5 no votes.
With that vote, you've sustained the motion from the Alderwoman from the 7th and have perfected Board Bill 114 as amended.
Board Bill Number 110, Committee Sub, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge. An ordinance to repeal certain sections of Chapter 15 and Section 11.20 of Chapter 11 of the Revised Code of the City of St. Louis, addressing acts of public decency, offenses against public peace, and other miscellaneous offenses, in order to eliminate outdated, unconstitutional, and conflicting provisions that are.
Alderman from the 14th, you're recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 110 Committee Substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. I would like to perfect Board Bill 110 Committee Substitute.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 7th that we perfect Board Bill 110 Committee Substitute. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I do have an amendment, but before I get to the amendment, I kind of want to talk about what the bill is. I think the amendment will get back to the original spirit of the bill. So Board Bill 110 Committee Substitute that came out of Public Safety Committee, it is repealing several already ordinances that we have on our books within the city of St. Louis. Several of these ordinances have been ruled either unconstitutional from the Missouri Supreme Court or the United States Supreme Court. Just want to highlight a few of those amendments that we will be repealing. Amendment 54729, desecration of the flag, was ruled unconstitutional by the United States Supreme Court versus Texas versus Johnson in 1989. Ordinance number 57249, vagrancy, was ruled unconstitutional by the courts in St. Louis County in 2021 by the Missouri Supreme Court. Amendment number 69428 is mediation or mandated mediation that was ruled unconstitutional by the Missouri Supreme Court when it comes to Missouri Bankers Association in St. Louis County in 2014. Section 15.142 of Chapter 15 was actually already a ordinance that was repealed. If you go to our zoning code, at the bottom, every ordinance have a ordinance number. This one does not. It was repealed, and this section was still left in. It talks about bringing insane individuals within the city of St. Louis. If you bring somebody insane into the city of St. Louis, it puts you, or mentally ill or poor, is a violation and comes with a charge. Section 11.20 of Chapter 11 also continues to talk about a hospital turns away a mentally ill person, they must continue to be in the custody of our police department. And then Section 16.08 of Chapter 16 is talking about if a person is drunken, it allows the judge to continue to keep them in jail until the judge may feel that they are not drunken. Our courts do really good right now with drug court and making sure that folks have rehabilitation, but this was something that was on the books that just have not been updated and outdated. And then also in the legislation, we are repealing Section 61415, which is our loitering ordinance, which is very vague, that we currently have in the city of St. Louis in two cities in 1972. It was ruled unconstitutional in Jacksonville in 1999. It was ruled in Chicago unconstitutional. This is one of the things that's on the books that currently our law enforcement does not use as much. They use other tactics such as trespassing, or I know we'll probably talk about encampments. I know a question that will come up from my colleague that they actually serve a notice, which they work with the Human Services to remove encampments. And as I'm talking about this legislation, I could not remiss to say, we continue to pass and break barriers down at this Board of Aldermen with legislation. And it's really good to see Madam President from the 10th Ward, Madam Assistant Floor Leader as an acting president right now on the dais. I think we'll give that a round of applause. It deserves it. So I wish we was making motions because then I'd be the floor leader, but we're not right now, but it's okay. And I do have an amendment. We did make some adjustments to another ordinance that brought concern up, and with that, I would like to make a motion to adopt amendment number 1 to Board Bill 110 Committee Substitute.
Moved by Alderman from the 14th, seconded by Alderman from the 9th, that we accept amendment number 1.
Any discussion?
Yes, I think the president will continue to finish speaking first.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Is there any discussion on the amendment?
Yes.
Alderwoman from the 11th.
Thank you. My problem with this piece, and it may be antiquated language, it says an insane person, which calls for a diagnosis. Police officers, social workers.
Point of order.
State your point of order, Alderman.
We're on the amendment, not the bill.
Okay, I'll wait for the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Is there any further discussion on the amendment number 1 to Board Bill 110 committee substitute? Alderman from the 2nd.
Thank you, Vice President. Will the Alderman from the 14th yield for questions?
Alderman from the 14th, will you yield to questions from the Alderman from the 2nd?
I do.
Alderman, you may proceed.
Alderman, just because I get confused here and there, what's this amendment doing? And can you really quickly just summarize the conversation that took place in committee?
Thank you, Alderman. Yes, so originally in Board Bill 110 committee substitute, on page 2, line 2, we struck out some words when it comes to our prostitution ordinance within the city of St. Louis. We struck out language that would strike out any court order when it comes to neighborhood protections and soliciting prostitution in those communities. So this was actually a concern, I know, Alderman, that you brought up to make sure that individuals that were doing prostitution, that court orders still would be uplifted in those neighborhood protections. So that was an error, and you brought it to my attention, and I appreciate you bringing that. With your concern, we wanted to make sure that we put that language back in the bill, because we're not trying to ensure that any neighborhood protections or court orders was being struck down with this board ordinance.
And I appreciate you working with me on that, Alderman. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on amendment number 1 to Board Bill 110 committee substitute? Alderwoman from the 12th, you had your hand raised. I'm not sure if you...
Somebody put it down. Somebody is controlling this. So anyway, the Alderman from the
I did
2nd,
speak with STL TV and the clerk, and they don't have access to, just for clarification purposes. We did look into that.
I don't know what's going on though, because my hand gets put down, I get muted. I'm not doing that. So anyway, so I couldn't hear part of what the Alderman from the 14th said, because I'm also going in and out. If the Alderman from the 14th would yield.
Alderman from the 14th, will you yield to questions from the Alderwoman from the 2nd or the 12th?
12th, absolutely, yes.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you, Alderman. I couldn't hear part of what you were saying. You're putting what back in? Because it got garbled at that time.
No, thank you for clarifying, asking that. So originally in the legislation, we have language around prostitution within the city of St. Louis. It's also language that trumps us at the state level. But what ended up happening is when I originally did the bill, it was an error by striking out sections that was already in our ordinance that says if a person has committed prostitution and the court has ordered them not to be in a certain neighborhood, I had struck that out. There was a concern that the alderman from the 2nd had brought up in committee. I think was very reasonable. It was an error, and we want to make sure that we are ensuring that if people have court orders against him, that they can't be in a certain neighborhood. If they violate this crime, that continues to exist. So we're just inserting back that language which already exists within our city ordinance so that it shows that it's not being striked out.
Is it only for the court order for if you've been instructed by the court not to be in a certain neighborhood? Because I thought I read in other parts you had court orders that you were striking out, or did you put it all back in? That's what I'm trying to
It's put all back in.
Okay. And that's too bad. I was not one of the supporters of the court order out of a certain neighborhood. And I'll tell you why. Because then that means they can go to all the other neighborhoods. And in fact, if a neighborhood is right across the street, then you could be said you can't be in Kingsway East, but you can be in Kingsway West, which are two neighborhoods right across the street.
Yes.
Also,
can I respond to that real quickly?
So sure.
I was going to say, and that was, we had talked about in committee, that was the point of kind of striking that out to make it more broad and open to all neighborhoods, but the alderman brought up, and I didn't want to do more damage than good. That's maybe something that we can visit in the future to make sure that we look at how this can be expanded outside of just neighborhood protections and what you're bringing up.
Well, and in fact, I took that to Jennifer Joyce when she was the St. Louis Circuit Attorney. And when I said that, she said, Sharon, nobody ever said that to me. I said, Jennifer, that makes no sense, okay? Because you can be just right across the street. So if you're going to have some kind of protection order.
I was saying you're correct. I'm sorry, it's lag. Sorry, go ahead.
So if you're going to have some kind of protection order, it ought to have been enlarged. I also just want to say that the whole thing about prostitution. So what did you do with that? Because I heard part of that, and I want to make sure I understood what you were doing. You're putting that back in as what?
No, ma'am. So only thing we putting back in is what was struck out around the court order. What we're adding in prostitution, which doesn't change statute or the state language around prostitution, but it's just adding language that there is an option for individuals that may be guilty or found guilty of a first violation of prostitution, of rehabilitation, or some type of services. It still doesn't strike out current language that is there, but just putting buffer language in our prostitution orders to say that rehabilitation services for their first offense is possible for individuals that are caught doing prostitution or community sex work.
So this would only be for, I'm sorry. So this would only be for the municipal judges. It wouldn't be for state judges. Okay?
Correct.
So
Because
if you're under something.
yes.
Right. Okay. And I have another question, and it's about the amendments, but the building. It's a lot of different things in here. We have a part of the charter says you can only have a board bill that addresses one issue. Was this run by our city councilor, our current city councilor for the board, to make sure that it fit within the requirements of the charter about not having multiple issues in one bill? Only the budget can do that.
No, it wasn't, but we did get a legal opinion to see if we were in one subject, and since it is talking about repealing language that all fits under one subject, is what I was told.
Really? Okay. Thank you.
Thank
No
you.
further questions.
Thank you for the inquiry.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Alderman from the 4th, you are recognized.
On amendment.
Thank you, Vice President, members of the board. I want to rise in support of this bill. This is a pretty routine cleanup bill, I think, and we should be engaging in cleaning up our books. We've done it in many other places. Some of this stuff, I may not agree with the courts on some of it, but the courts have certainly spoken and been clear. I think the biggest hang-up that I had, and I know that some of my colleagues had, was the language surrounding the court orders and prostitution just in general. I think if we look at the history of prostitution, the penalties vary wildly for the people involved. It seems to me that we tend to target the worker rather than the John, for one, and that tends to disproportionately put penalties on women and members of the LGBTQ community. There are many, many reasons why people may get into sex work in the first place, from the fact that they may just enjoy it, all the way to sheer desperation. And I think that diversion is super important when it comes to these first-time violations of this, because we want to be able to divert people who are acting out of sheer desperation away from that work if they do not want to be engaged in it. So I commend the alderman, and I'll certainly be in support of this.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Alderman, you're recognized to close.
On the amendment.
On the amendment.
I renew my motion on amendment to adopting amendment number 1 to Board Bill 110, committee substitute.
It's been moved by the alderman from the 9th, and I believe seconded by the moved by the alderman from the 14th, seconded, I believe, by the alderman from the 9th ward, that we adopt amendment number 1 to Board Bill 110, committee substitute. Madam Clerk, Well, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Amendment. We're now on Board Bill 110, Committee Substitute as amended. Any discussion?
Bless you.
Alderwoman from the 11th.
Okay. So, as I said before, the terminology, I don't necessarily have a problem with the bill, but the terminology insane, I believe, calls for a diagnosis. And any first responders are not qualified, certified to make a diagnosis of insanity. So I would ask that to protect the city possibly, and I'm not a lawyer, don't play one on TV, but this may need to be worded as a mental health crisis as opposed to a diagnosis of insanity. Okay. So okay. All right, thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 1st.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. Would the alderman from the 14th yield to questions?
Alderman
Absolutely.
from the 14th, will you yield to questions from the Alderwoman of the 1st?
I will.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you, Alderman from the 14th. You and I have discussed this in the past, and we're talking about this bill, but I just want to have the discussion again in front of the community as well. One of the biggest concerns that my residents often have is concern about encampments and making sure that if there are people illegally occupying space, whether that's a public space or whether that's a private home, that the police have the ability to enforce the law to make sure that these situations are handled appropriately and swiftly. I am deeply concerned about anything that would make that harder for our officers to do, just knowing how much of it a concern it is for the people in my ward. And I do appreciate the amendment that was made. But if you could just speak to that as well, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, no, I appreciate you, Alderwoman, for bringing this concern. It was also raised in committee around with the loitering, if that was removed, how could officers ensure that encampments that have been set up either on private property, under a bridge, public right-of-way, that they still have some type of tool in their toolbox to be able to properly dismantle these encampments. So currently there, and we pulled data, which I shared with you and willing to share with anybody on the committee, public data from SLPS, I keep saying PS, SLMPD website, how this term loitering they do not use anymore. So in the month of September, it was only reported 8 times. And to be clear, they grouped curfew, loitering, and vagrancy altogether. In August, it was reported 3 times, and in July, it was reported 2 times. When it comes to encampments, what our current police department currently does, if there is an encampment, which is within the city right away, because if it's under a bridge, that is state, so that's MoDOT, and they have their own process of taking down encampments. But if it is in a city right away, and which I've sent you some photos of what some of those notices look like. So the police department currently works with human services to try to make sure that there's proper time for these encampments to be moved. And if they are not moved or in a proper time, which they do put a date on all the big yellow signs, they use the violation of trespassing, not loitering. And they also, like I say, they work with human services to also relocate these people, make sure that their belongings is in a safe place. And if they cannot track down the person, unfortunately, they will throw it away. But this is a tool when it comes to encampments they do not use. They use trespassing or breaking a curfew if they are in a city park, because we have time limits when our city parks are allowed to be open or closed. So they will use the curfew violation when it comes to encampments.
Thank you. And is it your understanding that all of the citations that were issued under the loitering vagrancy curfew would have had other opportunities, other things that could have been applied for if there was illegal behavior occurring according to what the SLMPD are witnessing?
Absolutely. I believe that after having conversations, not only with them, but just other officers in the neighborhood, how they use other tools. As far as, like I say, trespassing is probably their number one that they would use, or a curfew, violating a curfew compared to loitering. So this does not, and I appreciate you bringing up, does not put less tools in the toolbox when it comes to our police department, but if anything, allows them to use the necessary tools that they already have, and this is just a outdated one. Even if somebody is standing outside of like a business or a bar, they would most likely use, if an owner call, trespassing, disturbing the peace, or if it's not necessarily after hours outside, but a curfew. So there are other tools that our police department are able to use to ensure that either an encampment is being dismantled properly, or that people who do not want to move, if they're breaking the law, that they can use necessarily different violations to find those individuals.
And aggressive panhandling would still be one of those options.
Those would be
if
one
that's
of
what's happening.
If that's what's happening, yes.
Sure. Okay, well, thank you so much, and no further questions.
Thank you, Alderwoman.
Any further discussion on Board Bill 110 committee substitute as amended? Alderwoman from the 7th.
I guess I talked so much earlier. I wanted to rise in support of the bill. The alderman from the 14th in committee, it was very interesting. It is my first time seeing a bill like this at once, but I did actually enjoy getting to go and research the Supreme Court cases and learning about the context that they were passed in, and the different instances. And so I just wanted to rise in support and thank you for this bill, and thank you for being proactive about policy and making sure that we are staying in legal compliance and we don't have anything in our books that is not allowable and that would be said to be in contradiction of what state or federal policy germanes.
Any further discussion on Board Bill 110 committee substitute as amended? Seeing none, Alderman, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board. Also want to, one thing I forgot and question to the Alderwoman of the 1st, another charge that they would use would be nuisance, public nuisance. So that is another tool that they have in their toolbox. I do want to thank members of the Public Safety Committee, especially, well, not especially, but also the Alderman from the 2nd for bringing up a concern and being able to work with him over the last couple of days to make sure that that concern was addressed, and also agree with the Alderwoman from the 12th. Maybe that's something that we can absolutely look at to make sure that all neighborhoods are protected, not just necessarily one to have like a court order, and have my commitment to be able to look into that with her. With that, I would just close and ask for a passage of to perfect Board Bill 110 committee substitute as amended.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderman from the 7th, that we perfect Board Bill 110 committee substitute as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Aye. Motion carries. Report of engrossment.
Board Bill number 116 as amended, 117, and 115.
Third reading and final passage of board bills.
Board Bill number 86, Board Bill number 116 as amended, and Board Bill 117 and 115. I'm sorry, 117. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on the motion to adopt third reading and final passage of board bill consent calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. I move that we adopt the third reading and final passage of board bills consent calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 5th, that we adopt the third reading and final passage of board bills on the consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Aye. Alderman Oldenburg. Aye. Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Brent. No, I'm sorry. Thank you. Alderman Balmer. Aye. Alderwoman Velazquez. Aye. Alderwoman Sanye. Aye. Alderwoman Spencer. Aye. Alderman Browning. Aye. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys.
Aye.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge.
Okay, Mike.
President Green.
27 courtesy resolution. That's what he.
That's his.
Aye.
for him. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Tyus.
Alderwoman, if you're on camera, you will need to.
Alderwoman Tyus.
Mhm.
14 aye votes.
With that vote, you've sustained the motion from the Alderwoman from the 10th and have third read and finally passed the aforementioned bills. Third reading and final passage of board bills.
Board Bill number 115, sponsored by Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderwoman Sanye, Alderman Aldridge, and Alderman Cone. An ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment authorizing the mayor to submit the City of St. Louis 2025 through 2026 Consolidated Plan and the 2025 Annual Action Plan to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, containing a severability and emergency clauses.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on the third reading and final passage of Board Bill 115.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Members of the board, I move that we third read and final pass Board Bill 115.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 115. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
I renew my motion.
Is there any discussion? Seeing, Alderwoman from the 12th.
Mr. Vice President, members of the board, I rise in opposition to this board bill. I said it already last time. The Alderwoman from the 7th says she doesn't want to say anything disparaging about Covenant House because it's the only place shelter for young people, and I invite her to move it right back over there. One of the big problems is Covenant houses in this bill, and we are funding them. And I want to know why. I don't want to hear anybody else tell me about, well, if the people haven't paid their taxes, or they don't have this and that. I'm not going to listen to you anymore because you're not listening to Covenant House is a nuisance to the neighborhood. And that's why I keep saying it, because they have burned down buildings, because they harass the people that live there, because you don't care because it's not next to your house. That's why I will continue to say Covenant House name out loud. I will tell you that I brought a state senator and a state rep who both confirmed that it was a problem, and somehow the city cannot do anything because it's okay to be next door to people's houses in North St. Louis. So I am opposed to them being funded, and I will be I've already called over there, and I will be continuing to oppose them being funded. If they cannot hold their nuisances down and they cannot run a good operation, they have no business being in a school, because that's what it should be. And the only thing that they should be hosting is a school, not a halfway house, not a house for people 21 and 22 years old, not a house for people who are doing drugs around people's houses and getting drunk and sex. That is not what our neighborhood was about. And it is one of the two bangs of existence that also got put in by not people that live here. It got put in by the Board of Adjustment and the Board of Public Service, but not the people who live here. And for that reason, I'm voting against Board Bill 115. Roll call.
So noted. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Alderwoman, you're recognized to close.
I renew my motion.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Aye. Alderman Odenberg. Aye. Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan. Aye. Alderman Ballmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye.
Aye.
Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Aye. Alderwoman Keys. No. Speaking out against. Alderwoman Tyus.
No.
This isn't a hard.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge.
Aye.
President Green.
Did you vote yes?
Aye.
I actually had to take a call.
12 aye votes.
Pardon me, Madam Clerk, Alderman from the 5th, you have to vote either aye, no, abstain, or present.
Why not?
Was that an aye vote, Alderman? Thank you.
12 aye votes, 2 no votes, and 1 abstain.
With that vote, you have sustained the motion from the Alderwoman from the 10th and have third read and finally passed Board Bill 115. Report and finally passed and signed by the President.
Board Bill number 86, 116 as amended, 117, and 115.
All other business being suspended, the President shall in open session affix a signature hereto to the end that these may become law.
All day.
I disagree with you.
First reading of resolutions in reference to committee.
We have none.
Second reading of resolutions, committee reports, and adoptions.
We have none.
Please dispense with line item 21. Miscellaneous and unfinished business.
We have none.
Announcements.
Monday, November 20th, the office will be closed for Veterans Day holiday. Tuesday, November 12th, HUDs will be having a committee meeting in the Kennedy Room at 11 o'clock. Thursday, November 14th, Health and Human Development via webinar at 9 a.m. Personnel via webinar at 11. Friday, November 15th, full board meeting in the chambers at 10.
Any further announcements? Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you. I'd like to announce a town hall that's being hosted by State Representative Kimberly Ann Collins. That's going to be on Saturday, November 23rd at the Wink Auditorium in the Central West End. The address there is 4504 Westminster Place. That'll be from 11:30 a.m. to 2 p.m. We have an excellent panel full of qualified professionals, and it'll be a great chance to talk about a number of criminal justice issues and the policy surrounding them. So come out on Saturday, November 23rd, Wink Auditorium, 11:30 a.m. It should be a very informative discussion. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 11th.
Thank you, thank you. So this Saturday, there will be a North Community Cleanup. We will begin at Natural Bridge and Kings Highway and move eastwardly towards Fairground Park. Everybody is encouraged to come out and clean up this particular corridor. We'd like to thank the sponsor, U.S. Bank, and especially my shirt guy, Chris Simpson, who is such a great supporter. And so I'm very, very appreciative for our community and our efforts to clean up the northern corridors in City of St. Louis. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Sir Vice President. I just want to give a reminder about the meeting to gay district residents. The Lafayette and Family Senior Apartments we are meeting with the developer this evening at 6 p.m. at the Southside Wellness Center. We do want to talk to them about just making sure that they're investing in the property. And so they are, we've had those conversations. And so they are going to be wanting to talk to us about the renovations and improvements they'll be making. There are some seniors that have been there for quite some time, and the building is overdue. And so I just want to make sure that you all know that we're having that meeting this evening at 6 o'clock at the Southside Wellness Center. And then I also did want to announce that same lines of housing, there is a renting in St. Louis roundtable that will be at the Central Library from 5:30 to 7 p.m. I believe at the roundtable they're going to be discussing landlord and tenant rights and laws and relevant statutes in Missouri. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 13th.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I wanted to announce our Hard to Recycle event on Saturday, November the 9th. I'm trying to make sure. Yeah, Saturday, November the 9th is from 9 a.m. to 12 noon. And so it'll be at I-70 Park, at 70 Industrial Parking Lot, and it's a partnership with 365 and Al Chess, the artificial intelligence for coupled human environment system analysis for sustainability. St. Louis University and North Newstead. And so people will have an opportunity to bring hard to recycle items from 9 to 12 on Saturday. And we'll make sure that we get those things out of our community.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
Mr. Vice President, members of the board, first of all, I'd like to thank the Madam Comptroller. She's been working with me. We have 6 senior buildings in our community, and one of them is Homer G. Phillips Senior Housing, and it has been a big problem with heating, cooling, air conditioning, and a lot of other problems. And we have come together, and I will be introducing a resolution that addresses some of the problems in Homer G. Phillips that was I worked on with the comptroller about how we can best address this issue. We're going to have to amend some things in our original ordinance. I didn't know this, but I found out since I now represent the area that Homer G. Phillips is still technically owned by the city. And since we've had all these problems, we looked at ways that we can make sure that the seniors that are living in the building live with dignity and that we can get things repaired. Some of the people who have been running that establishment haven't been able to get the air conditioning working correctly. The heating is not working correctly. There's other problems. People have moved out. I was able to go to Homer G. Phillips when it was first opened. It was in the then 4th Ward in the Greaterville neighborhood, and it was beautiful. And it is sad to see the problems that have happened there. But I do want to thank the comptroller because she's come up with an idea to be able to help that. And we will be introducing a resolution for next Friday. And also want to thank her for the wonderful meeting that we had. Comptroller and a lot of Black elected officials in North St. Louis. We had a standing room only meeting, and I appreciate that. And we're going to be trying to do this more often because we had so many calls for people, and I've never seen people from around the city come to a meeting like that and then stay and have conversation either in the cafeteria of the church or on the parking lot. So we're going to be doing that. And and it's all about how we can best keep our community safe and also our people in our neighborhoods, and so that people can come and understand that there's a diverse population in North St. Louis. And last of all, on Wednesday, November 13th, we're going to be having a neighborhood Zoom meeting to talk about the nuisances in different neighborhoods. There are emails and notices going out as we speak, and it will be on Zoom. And so you won't have to leave your house, but we're going to talk about some of the nuisances in our community and what we can do to make sure that our laws that are currently in effect should be being implemented and adhered to, specifically when it comes to closing nuisances down. So you will see something in your mailbox or in your text or something today or tomorrow or the next day about the meeting, which will be a Zoom meeting. Tell you how to get on the Zoom meeting about nuisances. Thank you.
Look forward to it. Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman from the 13th, or I'm sorry, Alderwoman from the 1st, you've not been recognized yet.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. I would like to announce a Public Infrastructure and Utilities Committee hearing for Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. in the Kennedy Room. Thank you.
Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. I just want to thank all the city voters that went out. We probably didn't get, what we hoped for on the national level, but Several propositions that would affect this board did pass, and voters went out and overwhelmingly voted on those. We probably didn't get one, which is unfortunate, but 3 out of 4, I think, is a step forward for the city of St. Louis. And I just want to thank all the voters for going out and voting on those props, and looking forward to those propositions coming into reality with future ordinance coming from the Board of Aldermen. So thank you to the city of St. Louis voters on those propositions that affects the city charter.
Alderwoman from the 10th.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. I have a few. First, the Action 2025-2029 Consolidated Action Plan that we passed today. It does have another public hearing coming up this Wednesday from 6 to 7 at 1520 North Market in the CDA offices. Also on Wednesday, there's a Foundations of Justice Courageous Conversations panel on the impact of gun violence in our community. You can look that up online. It's a great panel. I know a couple of people on there, including myself. And this Friday, tomorrow, gotta have some courageous conversations. Tomorrow is the Cammie Thomas's premiere of Every Bullet Leaves a Mark. Every Bullet Leaves a Mark, sponsored by The Brick. And this is Dr. Punch. If you're not familiar with Dr. Punch and the work that they do at The Brick, I'm definitely a testimony of it. And it is 6:30 p.m. tomorrow at the Missouri History Museum. And last but not least, in reference to November being National Homeless Youth Awareness Month, I want to make sure that we uplift the work that St. Louis Public Schools, as a proud St. Louis Public School parent, does with their Student in Transition program. And they are having a drive for Thanksgiving goods, for Thanksgiving baskets. So again, by it being National Youth Homeless Awareness Month, make sure that you take the time to engage, educate, and empower yourself on this issue, and how we can all come together and work collectively to solve it. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 13th, you had your hand raised. Alderwoman from the 13th. Any further announcements? Motion to excuse. Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the motion to excuse.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. All members were present this morning.
Wonderful.
Except for our clerk. No. We miss you, Sheree. No, just kidding. You did a great job, Tracy.
I'm actually going to take a point of personal privilege here as well. I should have done this during the announcements, but I do want to thank everyone for your patience today while I presided over this very lengthy meeting. I also want to thank our clerk, Tracy Billups, filling in for... I wish Madam President Green a speedy recovery, and thank you all for entrusting me with your faith and your vote to be the Vice President of this board. It means a lot to me, and thank you as we worked through all of the issues today. Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. I move that we adjourn until Thursday, November 15th, 2024, in the Board of Aldermen chamber. Friday, November 15th, 2024, in the Board of Aldermen chambers.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 11th, that we adjourn until Friday, November 15th, in the Board of Aldermen chambers. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Aye. Motion carries. We stand adjourned.